Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. My parents told me I was born lucky, but they did not tell me the price. I was 18 the night my parents tried to sell me to the dark. That sounds dramatic, I know. At the time, it just looked like a celebration. There were white tablecloths and little silver stands with place cards, people in clothes that cost more than your car, and waiters drifting in and out with trays of food I could not pronounce. All of it for me. For Jenna, the golden girl. I had just come from the state track championship. My spike's still in the bag in the front hall. I won that trophy. I had also graduated at the top of my class. There was an acceptance letter from an Ivy League school in a folder upstairs, along with a swimming scholarship. On paper, my life looked perfect, and I believed it was all mine. My hard work, my muscles, my brains. So, when my dad raised his glass that night and said my name in that booming voice of his, I smiled like I meant it, and tried not to think about how cold the big dining room always felt once the guests had gone. And they were gone early that night. By 9, the dishes were gone, the lights turned down, and it was just the three of us at the long table. Napkins crumpled in front of us, the centerpiece flowers leaning like they were tired. My dad tapped his fork against his glass and cleared his throat. Jenna, how do you think we've risen to this lifestyle? He gestured grandly, the way he always did when he talked about money. His gesture included the chandeliers, the paintings, the whole big echoey house. I saw our reflection in the window behind him. 3 people who looked like a family from a catalog. I don't know. Hard work and good connections. My mom made a little sound. Almost a laugh, but not quite. She looked down at her plate, tracing the rim with one finger. She said, "There's certain has been some of that, but how much actual hard work have you seen your father devote to anything?" Her voice had an edge I did not recognize. My father looked up, trying to make eye contact with her, lips pressed flat against his teeth. She went on, still talking to her plate. "The fact is, he doesn't have to." I waited for the punchline, but Mom does not joke. My fork suddenly seemed too loud against the china. Dad stared straight ahead for a moment, then turned his head toward me like it hurt to do it. "Jenna," he said, looking at me like he was staring into my soul, "your great-grandfather made a bargain with a dealer where we would get good luck and fortune for a negligible price for a lifetime. And that includes our children up to the time they are 18 and leave the house. Before they leave, the child, you, must also make a choice. Will you accept the bargain and take the path to great fortune, or decline it, and lose that link to continued wealth for you and the whole family?" If he had told me he was actually a lizard in a rubber suit, it would have felt more believable. I looked from him to my mom. She still would not meet my eyes. My heart did that thing it does right before the starter gun goes off. It is not fear, not exactly. It is a feeling like the world has narrowed to a single thin line, and if you slip off, you are gone. What do we bring to the table to get this bargain? I asked. "It will all be explained by the dealer," said Dad. He checked his watch like he was waiting for a conference call. My mom finally looked up, but not at me. She stared past my shoulder toward the hall. "He is waiting for you in the study now," she said. There was awe in her voice and dread. I pushed back from the table, so fast my chair scraped across the floor. No one scolded me for the noise. That scared me more than anything they had said so far. I walked down the hallway, the soles of my sandals whispering over the polished wood. Every family photo seemed to watch me. My 5th grade picture where I had new braces and 2 big glasses. My 8th grade swim team shot. My shoulders already broad. The coach standing behind me with his hand on my back like he had discovered gold. At the end of the hall were the double doors to the study. dark wood. I put my hand on one of the brass handles and hesitated. I could have walked out the front door, I guess. Called a friend, called a cab, called anyone. But that was not how this worked. In our house, you did what Dad said, and you did it well. I opened the doors. I had expected a shadow in the corner, something out of a horror movie. What I saw instead was a mild-looking man sitting behind the desk in the full light of the room. He wore a cardigan and jeans, dark hair combed neatly, maybe late 20s. There was a ceramic mug on the coaster beside him, steam curling up from it. He looked like a grad student on break. He looked up, smiled, and said, "I'm sure your parents told you the little secret to their success and what's at stake if you go rogue. So should we get on with it then?" "Wait, what? Who are you? What do I have to do?" I heard my voice shaking and hated it. The dealer cut me off. The smile slipped from his face like it had never been there. His voice turned sharp. "I don't have the time or inclination to allow this to drag on. If you agree with the deal, things go on as they have been. You will excel as you have up until now. Life will be easy. You will have success in every endeavor. Come here and sign on this line, and you live a dream life. If you refuse, you won't. Simple as that. You will have an unlucky life. Everything your parents built will come crashing down. I don't know how someone in your position could even hesitate. Stop making this take so long and sign." The air in the room thickened. It felt like someone had turned off the oxygen. The man on the chair was not mild anymore. He was the same height, the same body, but his posture changed. It signaled that he could be on me faster than I could reach the door. His hair looked a little Messier, his eyes a little brighter, older, somehow, hungrier. "I'm waiting," he said. My legs refused to work, like they knew something I did not. I stood there, breathing like I had just finished a 400-meter dash. "What are you doing? Get up there and sign," my mother hissed, but she was not in the room. I realized the study doors were not quite closed and her face was framed between them, one eye and half her mouth, both twisted with fury. She looked like a more terrifying version of herself. That look finally shoved me forward. Mom had spent my whole life asking for more. More medals, more points, more grades. I felt like I never satisfied her. I needed to try. I walked up to the desk. The dealer stood up. He was taller than I thought. He smelled of expensive cologne, the kinds of the men at the country club wore. But there was a hint of something rotten under it. His skin was perfect. Eyes a weird gold color that made me think of old coins. Once my eyes met his, it was almost impossible to look away. On the desk was a long legal-looking document with a typical yellow sign here, tab stuck near the bottom. Beside it lay a heavy black and red fountain pen and a small glass dish. "Give me your hand," the dealer said. His voice had gone flat, businesslike. "Why?" I asked, though I already knew. The pieces clicked together in my mind. Memory of dark, old stories my grandmother used to tell when she had too much wine. "Don't be a baby. Let's get this done. Yes, it has to be signed in blood. Big deal," he said. I should have run. I should have screamed. I should have done 100 things besides what I did, which was to freeze again, sweat profusely with a dry mouth. The dealer did not wait. He grabbed my right hand, his hands like iron, and in one smooth practice motion, he stabbed my index finger hard with a fountain pen. The pain was sharp and immediate. Blood welled up, and he turned my hand so it flowed into the glass dish. The moment the blood touched the glass, it turned black and bubbled slightly. Not dark red, not maroon, black, like oil boiling in slow motion. Something roared in my ears. I could barely hear him when he dipped the pen into the dish, then pushed it into my hand. "Just sign here and you and your parents will be happy for the rest of your life. Do it now." I knew he was telling the truth. That was the worst part. I could feel the promise in his voice. Easy days, effortless wins, the same invisible hands that have been carrying me all along. "Hurry up and sign," he shouted. The roar in my ears was building to the level of a hurricane. "Just do it." My arm rose on its own, like someone was pulling it up by the elbow. The pen felt heavy in my fingers, the nib already wet. Somewhere under the noise, a tiny part of me thought about the word lifetime. Then I thought about my future kids. faces I could not see yet, and a cold little voice inside said, "What about the price?" With a scream, I did the only thing I could think of, using every bit of strength I had gained from every sprint, every weight lifted, every lap swum. I used that power to bring the pen down as hard as I could on the back of his hand that was holding the edge of the contract. The pen sank in like it was going into soft clay. The dealer made a sound that was not human. The lights flickered. The air seemed to tear. His blood erupted from the wound and hit my face. It was hot and smelled like something from the bottom of a swamp. His eyes went wide and then wider, the gold burning into something so bright I had to look away. I heard footsteps behind me, my mother screaming, my father shouting something I did not catch. The room spun and stretched, then snapped back. When I opened my eyes, I was on the floor. The dealer was gone. The only sign he had been there was a light scorch mark on the carpet behind the desk. My finger was still bleeding. From the hall, I heard my mother sob, "What have you done? What have you done?" over and over. My father said nothing at all. People think curses are fireworks. Big, loud, obvious. My curse turned out to be more like a slow leak in a tire. Things did not explode. There was no lightning bolt, no swarm of insects, no demon leaping out a ceiling vent. The dealer vanished. That was all. 1 second he was there, making that awful sound, and the next there was empty air and the smell of burned matches. My parents did not comfort me. "You stupid girl," my mother whispered. "Do you have any idea what you've done to us?" I wanted to tell her I had done it for my own future kids, for a life that was mine, for a choice that was not made with a pen full of someone else's blood. But I just held my bleeding finger against my dress and stared at the mark on the carpet where the dealer had been. Nothing looked any different. The next morning, my dad's car would not start. It was a small thing, but the way he looked at me when he came back into the kitchen made me go cold inside. Dad's big investment went sideways a month later. Some tech company that looked like a sure bet evaporated overnight, taking most of his liquid cash with it. I heard him yelling about it from my room. The future narrowed. For me, no Olympic trials, no glossy magazine covers, no corporate headhunters courting me at fancy dinners. Just a stack of applications and a quiet little job at a not-for-profit corporation that helped kids in rough neighborhoods find safe places to be after school. The pay was not great. The work was hard. I came home tired in a way I had not known before, bone deep, with a head full of other people's trouble. But when I lied down at night, I felt something I had never felt in that big cold house growing up. I felt like the day had been mine. My parents did not attend my college graduation. By then, Dad was busy with lawyers. The embezzlement charges had taken shape, then solidified, then locked around his ankles. His talent for getting away with things had run out. Turned out when luck leaks out of your life, auditors can see everything you thought you had buried. Mom had moved to a small townhouse across town after the divorce. She worked part-time at a boutique and told anyone who would listen that her husband had ruined her. She did not mention the deal her grandfather had made or the one I refused. When I visited, which was not often, she looked at my clothes, my hair, my tired face, and sighed. "You could have had so much more," she said once, standing in the narrow kitchen making coffee that came from it instead of using a gleaming machine the size of a microwave. But the good things came on their own too. They felt different. They felt earned. One of those good things was my daughter. She was smart, but it did not come as easily. She had to study. She had to practice. She did not coast through races on legs that never seemed to tire. She tried out for track and made the team, but she was always in the middle of the pack, never at the front. Her 18th birthday came and went. We had a cake, a pile of modest presents, some handmade cards from the kids in my program who adored her from the days she volunteered there. No men in cardigans appeared in the living room. Maybe the world was fair after all. A month after her birthday, and 2 weeks before leaving for college, Lily came in from the porch holding a small cardboard box. The mail had already arrived that day, but this box must have been dropped off later, maybe by a courier. There was no return address, just her name written in black ink on the top. Inside was a fountain pen, heavy, black and red. The sight of it made me feel the terrible stab into my finger, the way my blood had turned to thick black ink when it touched the glass. There was a note folded beside it. "Mom," I heard Lily say. "You okay? You look like you just saw a ghost." The paper was the same cream color as the contract I had refused to sign. The writing on it was neat and precise. Not my father's, not my mother's, not anyone I knew. The note said only, "See you soon." Story 2. I started a government job in a mine, and something's not right. I signed the NDA and showed up for orientation. But something about the whole setup didn't sit right with me. The pay was sky high, the requirements absurdly minimal, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled into something off. I kept telling myself it was just excitement, just desperation. But deep down, I wondered if I'd been chosen for a reason I didn't understand, so a little context on how I even got this job. And why I can't just walk away $48 an hour for something so mundane should have been a no-brainer. But I know nothing easy comes without a price. The mine had been shut down for over 20 years. Hell, my father was fired when it closed. Last week, out of nowhere, it reopened. When I saw the pay, the minimal requirements, and the fact that they were hiring immediately, I didn't look a gift horse in the mouth. I applied and somehow, unbelievably, I got the job. The interview went like this. "Mr. Grady, why do you want this job?" "Well, I haven't had income for 11 months, and I have a 4-month-old at home." "When can you start?" "Monday." "Welcome aboard. Monday morning, 8 a.m. You'll get orientation, and your suit then." "Suit?" "Monday morning. Your sign-on bonus will be sent to your bank on Monday night. $1,500. Write your deposit information." And that was it. The interviewer seemed rushed, like he was checking boxes, not hiring a person. I've never felt so much like a quota in my life. But this quota just got a new job and money on Monday. I went home to Maggie and Sean to tell them the good news. He's only 4 months old, and I swear he could start talking any day. There's such intelligence in those hazel eyes. Maggie, in her usual fashion, seemed focused on sketching, what I can only assume is an illustration of our cat trying to get away from the baby, while Sean lay in the playpen, stretching his tiny nub fingers toward it. Our home is a house my father left me in his will. It's the only thing of real value he gave me. He had his drinking issues after the mine closed, so being a father wasn't as important to him as the bar. But we made this our home. There's a warmth here that I find comforting. Seeing my son try to reach the cat, hearing it purr like a vibrating phone, and watching my wife smile as she sketches a scene. I'd seen this little scene countless times over the last 11 months, always coming home feeling like a failure after interviews that didn't go my way. This time was different, and I came home and felt like a hero. As soon as I stepped inside, Maggie stopped what she was doing. "Well, how did it go?" I tried to play coy, put on a show like there might be bad news. But my smile gave me away like a flashlight in the woods. I chuckled with excitement. "I start Monday." "Oh, Alan, that's M.A." I didn't let her finish. I wanted to hug her. We held each other for what felt like an eternity. Her head on my chest, the sound of my cooing son nearby, the feeling of our cat brushing against us was icing on the cake. This was the best feeling I'd had in a long time, not since that Monday morning. Or maybe it all seemed so distant since that very first day. Monday morning came, and you best believe I was the first one in that mobile office trailer, fresh coffee in hand. Sitting at a table, I expected to see someone by 8 a.m. I'd gotten there eager and an hour early, but the longer I waited, the more I realized it was just myself with 3 other men for a mine shaft. You'd think they'd need at least 20 people. Back when my dad worked there, he was with 50 men in that same mine. Then, before I could even spark a conversation, our interviewer walked in, folder in hand, smiling widely. He pulled out an old-style projector, set up, and killed the lights. The projector flickered to life. The screen was almost too bright, colors saturated, with the logo of the project spinning cheerfully in the corner. Project Deep Core, a perfect circle, like a cross-section of the Earth. The outer ring was a dark, industrial gray, the mantle a deep red-orange gradient that seemed to glow just slightly. At the center was the core itself, bright yellow, almost too bright, and right in the middle were the bold letters, PDC. A voice boomed, almost sing-songy, like it was straight out of a government training commercial. The humming of the projector and fanfare playing almost made it seem like a fun cartoon to watch, if not for the unsettling feeling in my stomach. Welcome to the PDC. We are happy partners with the United States of America to ensure our citizens have a bright and safe future. Mining has been an industrial staple for Americans for generations, and now we bring it back for a new purpose, to assist our new fully automated extraction system. It will do the hard work. You just need to be safe in doing so. I stared at the imagery as it shifted, showing 5 rules, each bolded and seemingly just as important as the last. I inched closer in my seat, trying to memorize every word. I couldn't afford to mess up on my first day. Rule 1, suit safety. Before entering the mine, ensure your PDC-issue protective suit is fully sealed and intact. Follow the illustrated taping technique for gloves and boots to maintain an airtight barrier. Do not remove ventilation components while in the mine. If any part of your suit becomes torn, punctured, or compromised, proceed immediately to Rule 4 protocols. Cartoon worker happily tapes his boots, while a second cartoon worker waves despite an obviously smoking tear in the suit. Rule 2, communication line integrity. To keep you connected, each team member is equipped with a chest-mounted communications patch. Before entering the mine, replace all walkie batteries and test the line. Press the marked indentation on the chest patch to speak. Do not remove communication cords during a mine. Our UN do not attempt to unfasten or extract a radio during operation. An illustrated worker demonstrates plugging in a cable, smiling even as sparks fly from another worker's headset. Rule 3, group tether compliance. All crew members must remain connected to their designated lead tether line at all times. Check your harness clips regularly. Never detach yourself or another worker from the group tether for any reason. Animation shows 4 workers clipped together, bouncing happily down a dark tunnel that seems to breathe. Rule 4, emergency tether protocol. In the event of danger, suit breach, communication failure, or disorientation, activate the emergency tether crank system. Hold down the lever and press the red emergency button located beside the master crank. Remain braced and hold tight. The tether will automatically retract you back to the entrance. Animation shows a smiling worker being yanked backward at high speed, while another cartoon miner waves goodbye. Rule 5, terminal confirmation button. At the end of every mine run, proceed to the terminal marker station. Press the illuminated confirmation button firmly to complete your route. After pressing the button, wait for the PDC impactor system to confirm your run. 1. Low mechanical rumble. System waking. 2. 3. Sharp metallic strike. Alignment confirmed. 4. 5. Deep resonance through the walls. Impactor cycle complete. 6. Do not leave until all 3 sounds have been heard. Failure to complete this step may result in incomplete logs and an automatic recall of your tether group. Friendly worker gives a thumbs up as the walls behind him quietly shudder. Just like that, the lights flickered back on and the image from the projector burned into my eyes. I, along with what I could only assume were 3 other hired men, stood up, either out of seeing the others do it, or from a small shock as the door opened. A small stature man entered, wearing the same type of suit we'd seen in the training cartoons, only now it was real. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Malcolm. His voice sounded off. It reminded me of a foreign actor I couldn't place, thinner and stretched somehow, and that bothered me more than the suit. These are your hazmat suits. Please, gentlemen, follow me. We have a small locker room and equipment shed located inside the mine. Nervously undo chua cotter, gloves and boots, tight and sure, for wraps make the suit secure. This song echoed as Dr. Malcolm wrapped his suit, and then he sang it each time we wrapped our own. In a matter of a few minutes, the song was stuck in my brain, like an annoying nursery rhyme. These 3 strangers and I were taped up suited up, and now we had our tethers to secure. I stared down at my rope and the latch I had. My suit was number 3, and I was looking at the indentation described in the training video. As Dr. Malcolm checked it, I heard a click and the sound of someone else breathing. Then another click, another breath, and one more click. At that moment, I realized I was hearing the sound of my fellow coworkers. The subtle differences in their breathing, the small size, the clearing of throats. The static made my head feel like it would explode. Then Dr. Malcolm pressed a knob visible on the outside of our hazmat headpiece. And just like that, the voices stopped. There, I made it, so you press to speak. You shouldn't hear anything until people press the button. Go ahead, press the button to speak. If anything is too loud, you can lower the gain. There's a knob on the right side of your helmet. I looked around nervously and pressed the button. Hi, my name is Alan. The man in the suite number 2 presses his button. Sam. The man in the suit numbered 1 presses their button. Mike. I watched the man in suit 4, as they were still getting the last boot tapped on, entirely press their button while being hunched over. And my name, I just... Benny, he said as he just now triumphantly got his suit fully on, with both arms in the air, now showing victory. We marched into the mine. Mike attached the emergency latch to the entrance as Dr. Malcolm had instructed. We followed him like sheep being led to pasture. Our boots squelching under the soft, almost mud, but not quite ground. We were all approaching what seemed to be a small electric golf cart, with extra seats in tow. The deeper we went, the squelch of our boots sounded unnaturally loud. That taped song hummed behind me, or maybe inside my own head. I looked them over one by one while we each sat in the golf cart, getting settled in to drive deeper into the mine. Mike number 1, he has the emergency latch, tethered to Sam number 2, and then tethered to me number 3, and then Benny number 4. I was nervous being first in, but I wouldn't want to be the last either. As the darkness of the mine swallowed us, the main thought occurred to me, reassuring myself, at least we are not alone. 6 to 7 destroyed my family. Child abuse. You know, I found 6 to 7 funny at first. Absurdism is the name of the game when it comes to memes, viral videos, or any entertainment on the internet. Who remembers that gif of the Rothcopter? An ASCII helicopter built of ROFL blades, backslashes, and underscores. That was 25 years ago. Brain rot is an old phenomenon. So if you were expecting me to call 6 to 7 a signifier of the end times, keep scrolling. This isn't that story. This is the story of my nephew, Grant. Grant did not like 6 to 7. He didn't like most things. He was a troubled boy, to put it mildly, and the signs of his burgeoning antisocial personality disorder were plain for years. I still remember the beastly smile he wore when at 8 years old, he accidentally toppled a pot of boiling water onto his mother. The signs of psychopathy, if you like, were there for years, but we brushed them under the rug. Now our lives have been forever changed. It happened in June, on the 13th birthday of my son, Richie. His mother, Jody, and I were hosting a gathering at our house with classmates and relatives. Hey, Dad, tell Owen the joke you told me the other day. My son begged, the one with the numbers. I was surprised. Richie wanted me to be embarrassing in front of his friends. I foolishly left it to chance. Rabbit, meat snare. Sure, I said eagerly. Why was 6 afraid of 7? Owen giggled. 6, 7. The two of them hit me with that means accompanying two-handed gesture, as if they were shifting the balance of a weighing scale. But 6 to 7 was new to me. Huh. Don't worry about it. Finish the joke, Dad, urged Richie, whose face was red and puffy from stifled laughter. I raised an eyebrow. What did I say that was so funny? I've not even got to the punchline yet. I'll try again. Why was 6 afraid of 7? 6, 7, called out my niece Allie. There came cackles from everyone but her older brother, Grant. Stop it, he cautioned her. Their mother, my sister, Tessa, chimed in with a sigh and explained the situation to me. Grant and Allie have been fighting about those stupid numbers all week. Richie muttered under his breath. Yeah, 'cause Grant's a weirdo. I shot him only a half-stern look. I agreed, but I would have called him far worse. The last time my nephew had visited our house, Socks the cat barely survived. The poor feline came hurtling out of the kitchen in a panic, bearing a burn mark as fur, explained by a cigarette stub found in the outside waste bin. Despite his parents' best efforts, Grant smoked. Everyone knew that. He was the only smoker in the family. Tessa assured me nothing like that would ever happen again, but I'd known for years that something was wrong with my nephew. It wasn't a phase. He was innately broken, had been from birth, and neither Tessa nor her drunker husband, Pete, had ever been able to bring their brutish spawn under control. In fact, the boy's father hadn't even bothered to come to the party that day. He'd given up on Grant. Honestly, given that wicked and unfeeling smile on the boy's face, I don't blame them. They're not the only ones to blame, anyhow. Hurting animals? That's always a sign of worse things to come. I should have put a stop to it after he maimed Socks. I shouldn't have let Grant back into my home. "Come on, Dad," said Richie with a giveaway grin. "Give us the punchline." I rolled my eyes, but I obliged, knowing full well that I was playing into whatever inside joke the children were brewing. "Okay, one last time. Why was 6 afraid of 7? 6, 7? Allie yelled again, drawing further giggles. Again, from everyone but her big brother. "I told you to stop saying that." Grant roared, twice as loudly as the little girl. Then the 16-year-old boy backhanded his 9-year-old sister across her crown. Allie yowled and started to sniffle, whilst the other children gasped at the foul display of violence. They scuttled away from the older boy in fear. "Grant, stop it," said Tessa in a feeble voice. The boy ignored his mother and slapped Allie again, so forcefully that she fell onto hands and knees, looking up at me tearfully. I am ashamed to say that only then did I notice the uneven color of the girl's face, the slightly darker shade of peach around the eye, which I presumed to be concealer. Only around the eye. She was covering up something. As my sister trembled at the sight of her own son, I looked towards Jody, who was whispering into her phone. Calling the police, I imagined she'd threatened to do as much when Grant hurt the cat. I was proud of her for taking action, and I kicked myself for not doing anything to help my sister those many years. So I climbed to my feet. Better late than never, I suppose. "Right," I shouted at Grant. "You..." Ow! Tessa didn't tell me off for reprimanding her son. She looked relieved, if anything, that somebody had finally stood up to him. The 16-year-old, on the other hand, simply scrunched up his face and grimaced at me. "I won't ask you again, Grant. This is my son's birthday party, and you're ruining it. Outside. Now." To my surprise, upon being asked a second time, the boy did as I asked. He let me march him to the front door, with his mother and sister in tow. He let me, I must reiterate that. I may well have struggled to overpower him. He was of a similar height and build to me, 6 feet tall and broad-shouldered. I was glad that he didn't kick up a fuss. Now I think, as with Socks, this was all part of his game. He wanted us to go outside. "David," Jody started. 2 minutes, I told my wife as I led my sister's family out of the front door. "Right," I heard her say with faux steadiness. "Come on, everyone. This is a party. Who wants to, play a game?" With Tessa and Allie hiding behind me, I shoved Grant along the driveway towards their car. "Go easy on him, Dave," my sister said. "He's just a boy." "That excuse won't fly anymore," I snarled, before reminding myself to direct my anger at Grant. "You're a little monster. You think it a game to hurt animals? To hurt your own sister?" Grant eyed me with ferocity. In all honesty, that eased me a little. It had always been his lack of emotion which terrified me. So I decided I'd take rage over his typically cold demeanor. We'll go home now," Tessa stammered, fumbling for her car keys as she and Allie shuffled around to the car's front doors. I thought we would have a nice time. Allie really wanted to see her cousins. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm so sorry." "It isn't you who should be apologizing," I said, before jabbing a finger into Grant's chest. "Don't touch me, Uncle David," he warned. "You don't like that? Imagine how your sister feels." Grant whispered. I told her not to say 6 to 7. "This isn't the first time, is it?" I continued. "I see the concealer around Allie's eye, covering up some bruise you gave her, no doubt. Tessa's eyes widened, and she shook her head at me, cautioning me against taking that route. Too late. Grant's face shifted, and I realized I'd been a fool to cherish those wrathful eyes, to be grateful for a sign of emotion in the boy's face, fiery or otherwise. That didn't make him human. The fury in those empty brown eyes may have been ablaze, but it was a blaze in a blizzard. A futile spark of warmth and implacable cold. My terror returned as I reminded myself what I'd always known. This boy was hollow. "A bruise," said Grant. "No." I gave Allie a cut. Before I responded, there came pain. Searing, crippling pain in my lower abdomen. Multiple waves of pain, in fact. And I gargled a wordless cry of primal fear as I looked down to see the teenager repeatedly plunging a small knife into my gut. I staggered backwards after he retracted the blood-stained switchblade the fourth or fifth time. Then my knees juddered and my legs gave out. I was lying on my back on the driveway, limp, helpless, able only to lift my head slightly to look forwards. I thought I was about to die as that boy approached me. The worst part was that he didn't say a word as he towered above. Neither did I. Terror paralysis, I think. I heard my sister and niece sobbing at the car, and I tried to croak out for them to drive away to safety, but my voice failed me, and then my eyes widened as Grant put his switchblade into his pocket and knelt beside me, stale teenage breath puffing down onto my face. "Why was 6, he began, tapping me on the chest. "Afraid of 7? Tears trickled down my cheeks. "Answer the question, Uncle David." I shivered. Because the boy cut me off by lunging down, driving his teeth, as if they were not canines but fangs, into my neck. I screeched out in agony as the pain, perhaps worse than the knife blade, tore through my body. "Dave!" screamed Tessa, and I heard her running towards us as she thumped her son helplessly on the back. He stopped mauling my throat, and I let out a cry of relief. My gut and my neck throbbed, and I could feel warm blood trickling free. I struggled to crane my head forwards, but I looked up in time to see the teenage boy square up to his mother, then hurl her to the lawn. The rest happened in a flash. I didn't see it all, but I saw too much. I saw Grant plunge that blade into his mother's eyes, one by one, heard her screams. I'll never stop hearing them. I don't know whether I fainted from blood loss or the horror of witnessing the attack, but I don't remember much after that. I think I may have heard the blood-curdling cries of people and police sirens before losing consciousness. Thank God for Jody's 999 call, and thank God the police station is only a 2-minute drive from our house. I woke with Star in the hospital, and it took plenty of reassuring words from my surrounding family members to realize that I was safe. I was no longer trapped in that horrifying moment on the driveway. The terror passed. The trauma, I fear, is to stay. I blubbered when I learned that my sister survived, but was savagely blinded by her son. The responding officers managed to stop Grant before he hurt anyone else. The boy was sent to juvenile detention for aggravated ABH, which is a joke, as it was evidently attempted murder. He'll likely be out in a few years. The judicial system isn't equipped to deal with children like him. It'll try, but it'll fail. Grant will not be rehabilitated. He's evil all the way down. Story 3. I work at a strange ice cream parlor. Some of my first customers weren't human. Working at an ice cream shop, all things considered, should not be difficult. It should not be scary, and you should most certainly not feel like your life is at risk half the time. Unfortunately for me, the ice cream shop I work at checks all of those boxes. It's difficult, scary at times, and I'd be lying to you if I said that I felt safe 100% of the time. However, we do get paid above minimum wage, so it isn't completely terrible. Anyways, the shop is weird. I won't go ahead and say that I don't like working here, but if I could choose, I'd definitely go somewhere else. That's due in part to where the building is located. I live in Beecham, Maine, so naturally, the shop is called Beecham Ice Cream. It's the only one you can feasibly find some good ice cream at in our rundown dump of the town. It's coastal, And you can probably guess why it's named Beacham. Yeah, aside from the obvious, our town is known for some other things. Strange things. You might be thinking, oh, well, every town is unique. And I'd agree with you if mine wasn't the way it was. Just about anything you can think of, be it walking gargoyles or little goblins who are unbelievably good at carpentry, has walked into the shop. I know I haven't provided a great number of examples, but I think you get the idea. The town I live in is not normal. There's a reason for that, though none of the events that have happened from the town's founding in 1978 to New Year's Eve 1998 were all that notable. Just businesses opening, all that stuff. December 31st, 1998 changed the town forever. Townsfolk reported that through the month of December, there have been strange individuals lurking in the shadows. A couple people noted that these individuals were wearing white robes, a rather strange clothing choice given the weather. Some lucky townsfolk who were able to get close enough to the strange individuals to hear them talking reported conversations about the prophesied end of the world, and talked about hell opening up on Earth. But that didn't really matter. The cultists, as we call them now, turn out to actually be quite incompetent, so much so that the ritual they predicted would tear the earth asunder and allow the inhabitants of hell to ravage it. The ritual they conducted worked. Partially, they did open up portals to hell, but they weren't complete. Instead, they were more like small fissures in the earth, that and they must have summoned from the reject section of hell. Because our town was soon filled up with creatures that did not match the descriptions of the ones they said would come. Everything around a fissure still isn't completely known, but we do know a few things. 7 of them open up throughout different parts of town. 1 near our pizza shop, high school, movie theater, beach, car dealership, apartment complex, and lastly, 1 right under our ice cream parlor. As a result of having a fiery hell fissure directly under the store, some weird things happened. Even weirder is the fact that, unlike the other fissures in town, ours seems to attract the weirdos that came out of them, for better or worse. I, as well as my co-workers, have had to deal with it for the past few months. They've been here a lot longer than me. I only started here back in September. Still, I've seen my fair share of weird shit in this place. The actual building itself isn't too big. If I had to give an estimate, I'd say it's around 700 square feet. Layout is pretty simple too. You just walk in and the whole place is there. If you go to the left, you'll find a place where you can order your desired flavor of ice cream. To the right of that spot, there's an entire area dedicated to said flavors. I won't be listing all of them off here, but just know that if you want it, we probably got it. In the right-hand corner of the building, just past the ice cream, we have a set of bathrooms. Everywhere else, booths and tables for eating ice cream. That's about all there is to the layout of the store regarding important stuff. Oh, right, I almost forgot. Just behind the checkout area and all the ice cream flavors is a door. Behind that door is 3 things. 1, the freezer where we keep all of our ice cream. To get to there, you just open up the door, turn left, and open up the leftmost door. 2, when you enter the back room, it's sort of a cooler area. That's where we keep our syrups, sprinkles, and all that good stuff. Lastly, to the right is a simple storage area where we also happen to keep our cones and cups for ice cream. Okay, I think that's just about everything. Basic little description of my workplace. We can't take breaks inside for some reason. I don't know what it is or why, but for some reason, we cannot take breaks. Customers can sit and eat ice cream, but we can't take breaks. I found that when I tried to do just that, and a demon came into the dry storage area. Completely random, but he told me that I was fine for now, but that it was strike 1. I haven't gotten any since. I take my breaks in my car now. I can remember a lot of what's happened to me, seeing as how I've only been here for about 3 months or so. I remember the first real weird thing that happened to me. I believe it was actually a few days after I started here. So September 5th? Yeah, September 5th. I have the luck of being able to work here full time, as I just graduated high school back in June, taking some time off before deciding what I want to do for college. Adult stuff. It sucks. Anyways, I walked into the parlor, not expecting all that much action for the day. The jingling bell we have attached to the door rang as I walked through it, signaling my long-awaited entry into the ice cream parlor. I wasn't planning on doing too much talking that morning, but the world had other plans for me. "Hey, little man," Spike said from behind the counter. "You clocked in yet?" Spike, besides the other employees, of course, was the closest thing to a friend I could call in the shop. He wasn't too much older than me, 3 years my senior. He's a community college graduate, working here until he can get a proper job. Probably somewhere that isn't here, if I had to guess. Anyways, he's super cool. I like him a lot. He's tall, too. Looks like a member of a 2000s nu metal band. Think Hybrid Theory era Mike Shinoda. That ought to fill in the rest of the blanks. Black hair, too. Cool guy. I just wasn't really in the mood to talk that day. But I did anyways because it was a polite thing to do. "Not quite yet," I replied. "I did just get here. Any activity yet?" He put a hand on his chin, and it looked like he was thinking really hard. I was about to say something when he finally replied. "Nah, nothing notable." Spike removed his hand to his chin. Surprisingly, I used a small folding shelf near where the rows of ice cream flavors ended and went into the back. We use an app to clock in as opposed to a traditional time clock. I don't think it's nearly as cool as a ladder, but goodness is it convenient. The main color scheme for the parlor was white and blue, so naturally, we wore a blue shirt and white pants for our uniform. We also wore a white apron for some reason. I guess because it looks better? I'm not sure. I didn't make this place. We also need to wear something that covers our hair. Safety stuff. I just opt to wear a hat. Spike does the same. Everyone else either ties their hair back or, like us, wears a hat. Lastly, we wear gloves, but that's kind of obvious. All we really had to do was wait for customers and clean off the ice cream serving apparatus when the customers left. Other than that, we could shoot the shit and just have a generally good time while getting paid for it. That day's set of customers wouldn't be like the normal ones, though. I just finished cleaning off the scoop after serving a customer some pistachio ice cream, which is such an old person flavor, my God. When I heard the telltale noise of our entrance bell jingling, excited, but not really, I looked up to greet our newest customers. What met me was interesting. My greeting was caught in my throat as I got a good look at just what was in front of me. When I determined that what I was seeing was, in fact, real, I immediately went back where I found Spike looking for our vanilla ice cream. "Dude," I said, pointing to where I just come from, "I need you to come out and see this. It's crazy." I grabbed him by the arm and dragged him out the best I could. It's hard when they're bigger than you. I yanked him out front and did a C gesture to the customers in just on the other side of the counter. Spike took a good, hard look at them and determined that they were pretty weird. What stood in front of us wasn't a group of humans. No. What we saw was more similar to those gargoyles you'd see perched atop a cathedral somewhere in Europe. "Yeah, pretty weird," Spike said. "You want to take care of them for me? Still got to find that Nilla. You sure they aren't going to hurt me?" I asked, pointing at them. "Hey," one of them said, "just because we aren't human doesn't mean we can't hear you. No, we won't hurt you." That surprised me. But all it seemed to do for Spike was give him the okay he wanted to go back into the freezer. Damn it, I was on my own here. I shook the feeling and steadied myself. There were only 3 of the gargoyles. I expected them to be dressed in some super fancy clothing, just considering their likely place of origin, but I was surprised to find them dressed in regular autumn clothing. Sweaters, hoodies, jackets. They looked almost like regular human beings, except the fact that they were walking stone statues. I pushed that aside and moved closer to the cash register. "What will it be?" I asked. The first gargoyle spoke. I think I'll have..." He looked at the ice cream options again. "I think I'll have moose tracks in a waffle cone." "Okay," I said, writing it down on a small pad of paper. "And you too." The others walked up and began to recite their orders. They finished, and I looked at the small pad of paper on which I'd written their requests. Moose tracks on a waffle cone, rum raisin in a dish, also an old people flavor. Sorry, old people. And blackberry on a waffle cone. We did serve sugar cones too. but the waffle cones were by far the more popular of the two. It wasn't really anything to question. The waffle cones were simply better. I gave the first as moose tracks in a cone, the second is rum raisin in a bowl, and the third is blackberry in a cone. They paid with cash, told me to keep the change, and left just before they left. Actually, the first one came back to me. He'd gotten one of his friends to hold his cone while he pulled something out of his bag. When I got a closer look, I realized it was a container. I'd always hoped for something like this to happen at my jobs, but I didn't think it'd happen so soon. Can you fill this up? He asked, holding it out. It's for a favor. Need to please some individuals. No problem, I said, taking the container. What flavor? Definitely not chocolate, he said. Do you guys do peanut butter flavor? We got salted peanut butter caramel. Think that'll work? I asked. Yeah, definitely, he said. Thank you so much. I was worried I wouldn't be able to get this to them in time. But, it looks like that'll happen now, actually. Nice, I said. Think we should just go by cost per scoop and then pay that for the whole thing? I held up the container of ice cream. I counted every scoop as I put it in. 36. 36 scoops of ice cream. Yeah, sure, he said. How much will it be? Well, I replied, for $2 a scoop, at 36 scoops, that's about 72. You got that? He gave me $72 in cash and left with the ice cream. Just before the door closed, I asked one more thing. Hey, you gonna see vampires or something? The gargoyle turned around and chuckled a little. Nah, man, he said, turn around. Werewolves, actually. Werewolves. That actually kind of surprised me. By the time they had left, Spike was already out of the freezer and refilling the vanilla ice cream. I went over to him and tapped him on the shoulder. Hey man, I said, those guys were kind of weird. You know anything about them? Nah, he said. Why? Just wondering. I replied, they were really weird. I've seen weirder, he said, getting up and patting his apron. Those guys are nothing. I was intrigued now. What could Spike have possibly seen that was weirder than talking gargoyles? I had to know. Okay then, I said, what have you seen? You want to flip that open sign? He asked, gonna need some time for this one. I did as he asked and we sat down in a booth. So what's it gonna be? I asked. Give me a sec, he said. Gotta remember. Soon after, the memories came back to him and I learned just what he saw that day. And as it turns out, it was quite a bit weirder than the gargoyles. It was also how I discovered that our town has a cult. Story 4. There was something in the river. So, some background to start. I am someone who is very outdoorsy. I love camping, hiking, cycling, and basically everything outdoors. I am also a college student, and I have started doing a lot more trips alone. I also go to college right in the Appalachian foothills. And if you have never been here before, there's a forest that gets a massive amount of rain. It's very dense, and there have long been rumors of creatures that live in there. There are absolutely places where no human has stepped foot. Now, on to the story. A few weeks ago, after I was sick of exams, I decided to spend one night in the woods by a campfire to decompress. Despite having a full camping setup, I decided to sleep in my car because I was feeling lazy. So I took off one night and drove maybe a little too fast to where I was going to set up camp. I had found this little forest road next to the Chattooga River that had dispersed camping on it. Enough of a place to park and sleep pretty much, but no services and no restrooms. The first thing that I noticed heading there was how remote it was. I did not pass any houses or cars on the main road 10 minutes before the turnoff, and I passed over the ridge. The actual camping area was about a mile off the road. When I was driving past the start of the camping area, I was noticing how dark it was. There was no one and there was no light. The sky was overcast, and it was a damp 45 degrees. Now I had found a nice enough place at the end of the road, so I pulled over and started to unpack. The river was a dark shadow behind and to the right of me. I had a little bit of a weird feeling when I stepped out. Have you ever had that tight, anxious feeling in your gut? That is what I felt. There was not something obviously wrong, but something just felt a little off. While I was walking around, I also saw some weird trash and stuff. There was several burned camp chairs and something weirder. It was a perfectly circular hole with horn-shaped sticks stuck in it like a symbol of something. It felt weird, but I dismissed the worries and said that I would feel better after starting a fire. Keep in mind, I had only been there for about 2 minutes at this point. I started the fire. A little flame flared right up, so I grabbed my book and settled in for the night. About 30s after I did this, there was a massive splash from my right. If you can imagine someone threw a boulder in deep water, it sounded exactly like that. I jumped from the sound, but dismissed it as rocks fall from the bank occasionally. But then it happened again, exactly 30 seconds after the first time. At this point, I knew something was out there, and jumped in my car and locked the doors, trying to figure out what to do. And the forest was inky black outside my car's headlights. It was almost as if the world ceased to exist outside that limited area. After thinking for about a minute, I jumped out, put out the fire, and threw everything in the car as quick as possible. I drove off down the road, scared but also disappointed about what was happening. So while I was driving about a mile down the road, there was a campsite on the opposite and farther from the river, which was far less closed in. When I stepped out, that anxious feeling in my gut was a lot better. So I decided to try again to make a fire, not wanting to leave. But while I was setting up, that anxious feeling started getting a bit louder. I again tried to dismiss it as the fire was starting to flare. Set my chair and I was ready to relax. Then almost exactly 5 minutes after I had gotten there was another massive splash. At this moment, I knew I needed to leave. So I started throwing everything in the car while looking frantically around me. Then 30 seconds later, as I was pouring the fire out, there was another splash. I threw the last things in the car, started it, and drove out of there as fast as possible. I don't know who or what was out there, and I have no real desire to go back and find out. I ended up driving 45 minutes away to a state park, where I was surrounded by well-lit campers, and I slept fitfully. So all ended well, but I have no clue what was on that road, except that it was not friendly. Story 5. The Silent Girl from a Wailing Sea. They called them the Blue Boys because by the time the sea spits them back out, the cold has dyed their skin, tracing their veins indigo, turning firm, strong lads into stiff statues of bloat and salt. We've buried 3 this month, 3 half-empty coffins, as the water doesn't return all it takes. 3 more doors to knock on, 3 more families to destroy with all but a whispered few words and a salvaged trinket from drifting pieces of a violated vessel. We were a modest town once, defined by our close-knit camaraderie, our livelihoods endowed by the brimming life of the Muir. But now it only strangles us with loutish, nautical hands, drowning its patrons in a trench of loss and fear. And it only sinks us more with each passing funeral. Every clerk, every shopkeeper, every conversation has become blighted with worry and superstition. The docks are emptier than anyone has ever known, and many veteran tamers of the waves are reluctant to face the tide that has claimed so many. Gone are the days of children chasing gulls across the shore, faces smudged with brine and glee. Gone are the days of gathering feasts of music and bonfires, and old tales shouted over cider and boiled crab. I've lived here most of my life, my family hailing from distant shores, braced against the gales that can batter our cottages. The salted wind has carved lines into my young face, and the sun has nearly faded my eyes, watching the place I was born to tangle itself up like seaweed clinging to a hull. I might have been the first to break, had someone not stolen the privilege, on a fog-coated afternoon, within the warm walls of our local watering hole. I'll tell this whole damned room for naught, lads. Rafe had shouted from his piss-stained corner booth, wafting in an odorous bubble of beer with his weary crew. Them Blue Boys Arini just bad luck. No, it's no deceit to keen what she wants. It's something far fouler, and ye know who's brung about. His rant had quickly earned the attention of the crowded room, and he noticed, reveling in the attention, that old keeper of his like, I one wife the glassy stare. He'd been muttering strange words at the last high tide, last season. I'd seen him, when the first young gun washed up a day later. His eyes met the room of drunk, curious listeners. Gee, blame the sea? Nay, blame that old bastard and his hexes. I say, and whatever foul beast he brought to our mirror. It was a bartender, of all people, who encouraged a revered fisherman, as I made myself even quaint on my lonely table, praying to be ignored. Perhaps someone should pay the old bloke a visit? He said, just loud enough to be heard. I saw glints begin to spark in their boozy eyes. A mob, not unlike the ones from my parents' homeland stories, was forming. For months of this torture, they longed for someone to blame, someone to punish. Rafe's eyes went wild as a feral grin spread over his mouth. The others were already rousing, sloshing down their drinks and beginning to roar in agreement, their sticky fists pounding tables. I shrank further into the dark, panic writhing in my stomach. His eyes met mine. Still keeping your nose out of the wind, lass? I shook my head, but Rafe was in no mood to let anyone slip this net. He lurched himself across the room, scratching his stool along the floorboards as his crowd of rubble and ruckus took form. It was one of your kin, eh? He pressed, voice low. You want to see this, eh? He cried, and the crowd surged at his words, some faces scared with grief, others aflame with the thrill of violent justice. My breath became shallow as Rafe clamped a rough, leathery hand on my shoulder. There would be no denying him, not in front of such a crowd. And so I nodded. Good girl. I was only a child when I first met the keeper, chasing my younger sister among the wildflowers and tufts of seagrass at the foot of that looming, bleached tower. The summer air was warm and thick, with a scent of gorse and honeysuckle, as her laughing game came to an abrupt end when my foot caught on a hidden root, sending me tumbling into a mess of green. The sting in my knee startled out a sharp cry, and my sister's panicked face hovered above me. Through teary eyes, I saw him approach from forbidden steps, tall, with a stiffness to his stride and a kindness in his weathered look. Quite the wound, little lady. He knelt at my side, producing a clean handkerchief and a rusted tin of ointment. His large, worn hands were gentle as he cleaned the scrape, and as he worked, humming a foreign tune to himself, he soon coaxed a wobbly smile from my sister and me with peculiar stories. Tales of shipwrecks, rare sea birds, and midnight flowers from lost islands that only reveal themselves under the lighthouse's beams. He ended his stories with a warning. Little girls should know better than to play by the lighthouse. Even then, I sensed something otherworldly in his manner, as if he belonged to another realm. But that day, beneath an endless blue sky, he was a quiet and straightforward hero who mended my wound and sent us home with a handful of sweets and a newfound reverence. Future encounters were always fleeting over the years. Sometimes, I'd see him trudging through the mist at daybreak, his shape devoured by an old oilskin coat, carrying pails from shore. Other times, we'd share naught at the market, his eyes never quite finding mine, constantly darting toward the sea as if it spoke his name. Once, I watched him mend fishing nets at the rocks, his hands deft and silent, humming that same foreign melody only the gulls seemed to answer. People spoke rarely to him, but children watched from behind fences, trading chronicles of his magic or his curse. But I remember clear as the night his light went out. The beams, so constant, suddenly vanished, and our harbor became shrouded in black. It was the same night the first body was found. Face blue, eyes wide. The bells were deafening. No one slept. By morning, the lighthouse door was bolted. The keeper nowhere to be found. He must have sheltered himself inside for reasons unknown, ignoring all begs and demands that met his doorstep. No more than a few nights later was when last I saw my stubborn sister. When the sun had barely slipped beneath churning waves, I woke to the sounds of the bedroom door snicking shut. At first, I believed it was a dream, that the familiar wind was rattling on the latch. But when I felt across the bed, her side was cold and indented, and the front door was swinging open. I failed to call her name as my bare feet met the sandy path towards the shore. There at the border of a restless surf, I saw her as she walked gently into the sea, her white nightgown trailing behind her like a wisp of cloud. She gave not one look back at my frantic waves and gestures. Not a word. The water swallowed her, quick and silent, before I could even reach the pier. They found her days later. What was left, her face bobbing along the water surface amidst a foaming froth. She was one of the earliest, a blue boy, though she had never been a boy at all. 4 months of silent grief, manifesting, finally, into a lantern-lit, strained march through the fog. The crowd moved as a single, muttering mass, boots scuffing the damp earth, lights swinging shadows across sour, tense faces. I wished to walk at the rear, just another soul swept up in a vengeful resolve, looking only at gnarled fists instead of red-rimmed eyes. But Rafe insisted that I walk to him at the front. His voice let in low, grim bursts, knuckles white around the handle of a meat cleaver. In my place, somewhere behind, a boy began to quietly sob to themselves as a lighthouse, a pale specter at the edge of the world, emerged. Rafe took an unwavering step towards a silent, dead monolithic tower. My stomach twisted as every tale, and a single kindness clashed with the contagious anger and dread driving us forward. We would not be halted. Only the echoes of our siege would spill across the bay, and the distant, mournful cries of gulls overhead. Rafe pounded his fist on the door. "Open up. We know you're in there." His minions became wired, twitching with driftwood clubs, knives, and whatever other instruments they could use to inflict harm. A restless collective of 20 strong, brave bodies. Is that what we were there to do? Hurt him? I made myself scarce, ushering away from our leader to a withered bed of wildflowers, as Rafe began to attack the door, hacking into its thick wooden seams with the utmost ferocity. It was fruitless, his efforts becoming deranged and desperate, until a titan of man stepped forth, armed with a hammer. He gestured to the handle and hinges, weak points, and assisted Rafe with the long, tedious task of ripping down a door. Every strike, every crack of the wood, every morsel of progress made jolted the crowd like they were starved dogs taunted by fresh meat. The door eventually surrendered, ripped from its frame by 3 men, and was hurled down the cliffs to meet a splintering demise. Rafe, sweating, spun around to find me amidst the dying flowers, his eyes manic beneath the wet mess of his fringe, and offered me a hand. "Justice, for ye sister, girl." I didn't believe I had a choice. I slowly took his offer, and we became the first to enter. We stepped into a spacious, circular chamber of slick, moistened walls and peeling green paint. A spiral staircase, iron treads crusted with rust, wooden handrails worn smooth, snaked upwards along the wall and down, vanishing into a murky gloom. As a handful of us filtered in, we warily inspected the central living space. It was sparse. A small cot with a threadbare blanket sat beneath a porthole window streaked with barnacles. An iron stove, cold and black, stood in a corner, flanked by a chipped kettle. A battered, cluttered workbench sat on another side, overflowing with sea charts and waterlogged tomes. Shelves held strange objects, wooden carvings, a jar of cloudy water, and faded parchments of strange symbols. One stood out, a carving larger than the others, maybe a foot high, stained a dark greenish black, was a hunched figure of thrashing tentacles, encroaching wings, and clawed feet half buried in chiseled ripples. Its bulbous head was crowned with curling, segmented palpi. Its eyes were deep-set hollow shadows. Rough gouges resembling scales were precisely marked along its torso and limbs. Several villagers drew back, almost by instinct, while others clustered closer, pulled by a curious lure. A young man, tears still welling in his eyes, became infatuated with the pungent piece of wood. He hummed a tune to himself as he bowed his head. One I had heard before from a far older, reclusive man. Rafe's eyes were fixed on the effigy. Beside him, faint murmurs bubbled out while behind us. Lanterns flickered once, twice, and the wind let out a keen, hounding sigh. Someone in the rear, near where I had found myself, shuffled with uncertainty, glancing at him. It seemed the entrance itself had grown further away. Then, the young man spoke in a pitiful, quivering whisper. "Bless us, O priest." A suffocating silence fell upon the room. It happened too fast. I opened my eyes and spun to count the faces. Rafe The boy and myself and no one. Footprints, damp and scattered, traced aimless tracks on the stone. The others were gone, extinguished as quickly as they'd burned, blinked out in an instant. Rafe bolted to the door, chest heaving. His bravado wavered. No, where'd you go? His plea boomed out into the still, silent fog. The hushed shiver that ran up my back felt colder than the sea itself. Rafe rounded to the boy now kneeling before the idol, praying in a dialect I could not understand. "What have you done, boy?" He spat, his voice shaking, as he smashed the statue from the shelf, breaking the boy free from whatever zealot trance he was in, replaced with a heavy weight of sudden, unexplainable loss. A mob no more. We were witnesses to an inexplicable phenomenon. The boy stammered a free word from his mouth as Rafe, violently, hoisted him up by the neck and shoved him into a wall. "Are you bewitched, son? Cursed? Hex?" The boy's pleading eyes found me, a timid shape scuttling her way to the exit. "I dash." "I don't dash," he choked out. Metal clangs erupted from the staircase. Something was still here, downstairs. Rafe swapped targets and, like an animal, skittered his way to the first step of the descent, the boy becoming no more than a memory. "Your name, lad?" he asked, transfixed on the darkness before his boots. Caleb," the boy squeaked. "Are you one of mine?" "And dash, no, sir." "Ye are now. Lead us down, Caleb." He stepped to the side, a fire blazing in his eyes, and gestured for the boy to take the plunge. As he did, he caught me almost loose from this dilemma. "And where the flying fuck do you think you're going, lass?" I pressed myself so tightly against the wall, I nearly hoped to disappear into it. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat, every muscle bolstered in anxious stiffness, as the trembling boy took a shaky step into the breach. I could do nothing but watch as an unforgiving darkness consumed his entire form, and then Rafe, once again, offered me his hand and I, a final time, slowly crossed a room and took it. It was a laboratory, a sprawling, timeless, cavernous lair, the walls cut with mineral stains of marine horror. Green and orange-tinted lanterns, fat with puffy moths, illuminated the ugly, metallic den of shunned, heinous science. Pickled messes festered in stained jars. Eels knotted in impossible shapes, milky crabs with too many legs. A clot of eggs glued to terrariums, tools and trinkets were aplenty amidst dense notebooks. A single, giant chalkboard brutalized with equations and sketches squatted in a corner of corrosion. Scribbled madness crept along and down its surface like a leak. And in another corner, within a crystal-clear cylinder of glass, was a fair, beautiful young woman, alive and awake, her eyes longing toward the three of us, up to her waist in brown, bloody water. Her mouth stretched to speak, and from the gaping depths of her throat came only crackled, inaudible gurgles. Frustrated, she struck her glass prison, splashing about like a flailing fish, and clawed at her own neck, as if desperately trying to find her own voice. But another voice crawled out of the dark instead, fractured and wet. They called it mercy once, to be lulled by the tide, to be promised an end at sea. It is a lie. The keeper emerged from the shadows, waddling into the light, drenched and slimy with bloated, saturated mossy skin ready to burst like a balloon. There were cracks in his face where fizzing salt water oozed out and dripped to the floor with a soggy splat. His eyes were glazed and tinted with shade of coral pink, and he unceremoniously stunk like a long-dead, rotten trawl. There is neither peace nor pain, only an eternal slumber, rocked by drowned lullabies. He slugged his way to his prisoner, resting a hand on the glass. Every word he spoke took tremendous, gagging effort. "You showed me, didn't you? I heard you. I heard him. But there is no song left now. None. Only the chorus of old bargains struck in the deep by those far older than I, with things far hungrier than the sea herself." He turned to face us, his prisoner grudging his very presence. "They took your lil marching mob, one by one, to the shore while you slept. Do you remember? Go and look." Rafe marched towards the ghastly keeper, his stench making him gag. "Enough with your rambles, old man," he snarled. "What have you become? What dark work have you woven?" His eyes met the imprisoned woman, who tapped and fidgeted within her case. "And who the fuck's this, dame?" The keeper's lips curled into something like a smile, water beads dripping from the gapes in his mouth. She is a curse, son, from a far harbor from fairer shores. I have tried to fix her, but the deep longs to reclaim their song. As if on cue, said curse within her glass cage began to convulse and seize. And oh no dash, the keeper began, retreating into darkness from whence he came, as he miserably sifted through various tools across a table. A vigorous thunder rattled the tower as the woman's blue eyes flashed an impossibly bright pink. Immediately, a searing light, far more colorful than the coralline tint in the keeper's own eyes, flared in both Rafe's and Caleb's stares. Their bodies stiffened and turned in unison. Their fists trembled, and a bloodlust frenzy enthralled them, warping their faces into hardened masks of unfiltered rage and purpose. The woman behind the glass, her more uncanny features momentarily illuminated by the light from her eyes, stared solely at me, her power unmistakable, but somehow utterly useless on my mind. Rafe was first, dropping his cleaver and charging the keeper with a roar that was barely human. Caleb followed, silent but wild, with his hands outstretched, the keeper's arms raised in a reflexive defense. But there was a moment of understanding in his shocked eyes, before the chaos, as he looked only transfixed at his beautiful prisoner. The two men pounced on him, raining down blows with primal violence, echoing through the chamber a symphony of splattering blood and brutality. The woman looked to the cleaver with a silent plea, then at me, then the cleaver again. I'm not sure what compelled me. Her beauty, sympathy, the fear that Rafe and Caleb's delirium would soon aim at me. But my hand found the cleaver's grip, raised it, and brought it crashing down on the curved glass. It cracked, shivering under the blow, and then burst outwards. Cold, briny, murky, bloody water rushed out, swirling me up as I tumbled to the floor, my limbs becoming twisted with the woman as she gasped and coughed up foam, her voice still a hoarse, wordless gurgle. She steadied herself, grateful, and for a moment, I saw only lost stars in her charming eyes as the light within them flickered. She kissed me, passionately, intimately, and every sense and nerve within me detonated as a torrent of water gushed from her mouth into mine. I pushed her off, choking and spluttering, much to her visible dismay, as Rafe whirled around to face us, angry and confused, covered in blood and grime, while Caleb, shaking, silently wept over the keeper's broken, motionless body. Monster, he was upon us in seconds. The woman scampered up to her feet, stretching her limbs and squaring her shoulders as a wild mess of swinging fists assaulted her. She deflected the first blow, but Rafe's strikes were reckless as he, for lack of better description, started to beat the shit out of her. In the fray, almost slipping in the water at our feet, I found myself bringing the cleaver down on his shoulder, ejecting a geyser of blood. A flailing, panicked elbow connected sharply with my temple. I could barely hear the woman's strangled gasp before my vision dazzled into spots, the world slipping away, and then, muffling the shouts and an ear-ripping scream, my eyes dragged me into an empty, blank nothingness. I remember a sky swollen with clouds, my hands raw from gripping the splintered rim of a skiff. Birds cry somewhere above, unseen, and every swell of the waves feels like it will tip this fragile shell into the drink. My petticoat clings to me, sodden and freezing. Salt stings my lips, and each breath devolves more into a rasp. The lantern at the prow reveals my distant brothers, left to drown with what remains of the vessel. This air promised adventure. A lie. It only promises the grim patience of sea, awaiting the young and naive to embark on their voyages, to abandon their civil, industrial safeties. I see a shape moving amidst the wreckage. I shout, my voice breaking the wind, but there is no answer. The horizon is nothing. The shore behind us is erased. Lamps from a distant harbor are mere pinpricks, if they are even there at all. My arms begin to ache as I row and row until my muscles tear and the blisters open. My pain cries and whimpers lost in the cold. I am alone. I am going to die. The wind lashes at me, fierce and cunning, as my lifeboat grows still, helplessly veering in the waves. I curl into a ball as a monstrous, dark mass stirs beneath me, too large to belong to any earthly whale, and I muster every prayer possible from my blue tongue. And then I hear it, as if something below answered my small surrender. A song, ancient, hungry, And my last memory of this mortal coil was not fear, but a bliss as I looked aside of my boat, to the splashing of waves, to find a kind, smiling face of a woman with shining, pink eyes, offering her hand. This was not my life. This was not my mind, my memories, my dreams. I am, again, a witness to something phenomenal, to a life most monstrous and wonderful. We are deep beneath the fathomless blue, where no sunlight dares wander. My skin, supple, scaled and a glimmering teal, glides through black water. Around me is an endless choir, my sisters, raising a song that rattles the bones of lost sailors. Their boats wrecked, their limbs slack, and their eyes drift as our music winds them into peace, then pulls them gently through the frigid water and into our arms. Mercy, and a balm to the ears of the one who slumbers in the most bottomless abyss. His occupancy is a constant tumor on my mind, vast and incomprehensible. We weave our melodies not for ourselves or the lost souls at sea, but to lull him, to shield the waking world from his gaze and to soothe his endless, nightmarish hunger between his dreams. Sometimes I am rewarded, and I rise to collect new blood for his ranks, a gift and a tribute, another sister. One night, as storms gnash at an island where the veil between land and sea is thin, I surface atop foaming rocks. I sing, as I have sung since the first flood, and my voice threshes through the hearts of men. I do not notice that one of them is a hunter until the harpoon pierces my side, and the net falls tight as steel around me. My gnashing teeth and glittery eyes fail to frighten him as he utters words in an old tongue, poisoned with grief, and hums a melody of my own kin, dragging me onto his ship, chained, exhausted, wounded, and dry. My voice shrinks into a whisper as I am ferried away from sisters and songs and a deep lord, across harsh, foreign waters to a tower of stone and glass on a thriving, oblivious coast. Beneath the indifferent sweeps of light beams, he imprisons me, first in a tank, then a cage, then a cylinder of brackish water. He studies my voice, notes my every attempt to sing in a quest to unravel the music, until my throat begins to fail. But I do not forget, nor do I forgive the icy stare of the man who watches and waits as my memory of the depth bleeds into the harsh walls of his dungeon. He drips potions into my prison, wafting scents and hallucinogenic spasms into my eyes, loosening a long-buried anchor in the recesses of my mind, beyond my lord's throbbing presence. It is not a blessed recollection. It is a torturous regurgitation of mortality, the drizzle of London mornings, the clack of typewriters, the smell of a waxed floor and fresh ledgers. I sit tucked behind a brass-screened window, counting coins. My days are only an orderly routine, not an eternal life amidst the blue. It is a cancer, the embrace of my mother, the sternness of my father, flicking through a newspaper, and the laughter of my youngest brother echoing down the halls of our home. When night comes, it blooms with candlelit dinners as I sit beside a man unknown to me, whose fingers brush my red hair from my face. We dream quietly of escape, of ships, of wide water, of building a life of few ordeals. I remember the love in his eyes, the way he said my name, the way I once believed that my future had room for joy. An island just for us, Sophie. My heart aches and breaks as I see myself sweeping down cobble streets and hear the city's noise so distant now. There's a grand ship, a crew of my siblings, and a promise wrapped around the finger of my love. There is a hurried goodbye. The faces of my parents blur with pride and anxiety. The embraces of my friends are warm for these stolen minutes. I am simply a girl, a daughter, a sister, a clerk, a lover, never dreaming that her voice might one day still the sorrow in a drowned god. And then I return to vat, a monster again, to watch my captor unravel, a timeless ritual, churned on with my own thoughts. I see the slow hunch eat his shoulder, his fingers swell, his eyes dim with a pink glow he thought himself immune to. Something far worse than my song had reached him, within the comfort of his own dreams. His feet faltered, and he would stumble between scattered notes, sometimes pausing to stare at me with a begging, hollow gaze, as if I might forgive him or appease the one that insulted his sleep. Other times, he would speak to things only could see, muttering names I'd never known. On the worst days, he would press his head to my glass and weep with eroding wounds, each breath tearing through brittle lungs. Once, He tried to hum a half-remembered lullaby, but his voice broke, rotten. I suddenly awoke from a fractured dream of sea wenches and a doomed old man jolting into a room sodden with violence and gore. I pushed myself up from cold stones, my head still throbbing from Rafe's elbow, my ears ringing with the memory of toxic water forced down my throat. For a moment, as my vision cleared, the world wobbled as if half submerged. Then I saw them. Rafe's body sprawled in a widening crimson pool, his eyes empty, fixed on the ceiling. His face frozen in the grimace of whatever horror was unleashed upon him. Caleb, too, was crumpled against the wall, neck twisted at an impossible angle. Sophie, I think that was her name, lay by the stairs. Her skin gleamed with the blue-green sheen of a caught fish. Her legs had become a shimmering tail of quartz scales and fins, and her ribs, gills ragged, heaving, slick with dew, open and closed along her sides, twitching desperately as she gulped for air. Her fingers, tipped with bladed red claws, clutched at the metal steps. Her face was still beautiful, but her eyes, pale and pink, were wide with panic. She reached for me, mouthing a wordless request. I dared not move, rooted by shock and pity, as her tail slapped the ground in an attempt to communicate, or a failed strive to move. It then sprouted in my skull a deep rhythm, a pulsing worm, shoving my doubts aside until a single goal remained. Help her, help your sister. My timid hands found her body, moving with a mind of their own, and with every ounce of strength I could muster, I cradled her into my arms, into my chest, and lugged her out from the grim, dark prison that had been her home for an aeon. She grew colder and stiffer as we ascended those rusted steps, her battle for breath becoming a one-sided war grit, until we emerged out of the lighthouse, free, to a wilted garden and a town on the brink of oblivion. The fog had subsided, replaced with a catastrophic, raging storm of cutting gales and cataclysmic thunder, as if the gods themselves were planning to rip our grisly residence from the earth and hurl it to the heavens. Every home shook, every latched window rattled. The wails of livestock cut through the madness as debris and produce and materials were flung up into the sky and down the street. A weak, clawed finger gently tapped my chest as I braced against the elements. I looked down to one I carried to see her pointing to the beach, to the sea, where the epicenter of the storm originated, manifesting as an unrivaled, titanic tornado of torrential wind and dark water, crackling and sparkling with grotesque, eldritch lightning of green and pink at the crisp of the horizon. As the lightning flashed amid those smoldering, smoking clouds, a monstrous silhouette became visible within the hurricane, an impossibly large, hulking behemoth, older than the sea itself, its features all too familiar, here to reclaim what was rightfully his. The weak chords of song left Sophie's lips as we journeyed to the shore, while the parasite in my head throbbed and moaned in sync. Every man, woman, and child I had ever seen through my years stood waiting amongst the sand and the rocks and pebbles and across the wooden boards of the harbor, the pier, or stood still throughout the street, not a lick of motion to their bodies, not a glimmer of life in their unblinking eyes as they stared. 300 lives at least at the approaching nautical colossal, wrapped in a coat of unstoppable nature. The surf bit at my knees as we reached the water, the cold stinging more than any wound, as I gently lowered Sophie to be embraced by the waves. For a breath, nothing. Then, with a violent jerk, her tail shivered and flexed, scales flashing brilliantly in the lightning's glare, and she reeled upright, drawing great, greedy gulps of air, her lips splitting into a wide and triumphant smile. But, newly alive and electric, she did not race towards a monstrous silhouette dwelling at the storm's core. Instead, she lingered, floating beneath the surface. Her luminous eyes locked with mine, relieved and terrified. Something intelligible slipped from her mouth, carried upon a strong melody that snuck through the screaming wind. Thank you. The storm itself hushed for a heartbeat, and the towering titan seemed to pause, hungry tendrils just out of reach, as if even the sea recognized the power that returned to its bosom. She grinned, holding my gaze, and, as if it was the most critical decision in her life, she slowly offered me a hand, an invitation, a promise of escape, a belonging of power. But my heart clenched with memory, the ghost of a sister, an empty house devoid of life, inescapable loss, and the weight of bargain at sea. I shook my head, standing against the riptide, No, the word is soft, nearly swept away. I can't. Sophie's smile fumbled. Her eyes blinked with understanding and sorrow, and she bowed her head, pressing a cool, web palm to the water's surface. Under stars, when you dream your last. Then she was gone, darting off into the dark deeps towards her lord. Several shapes and bodies emerged and swam beside her as a song began to tug at my bones, unfaltering as it reached the storm. I blinked, a reflex, nothing more than a nervous flutter of lashes, and it all disappeared, so sudden complete that it snatched the air from my lungs. The air was warm then, touched with the delicate, golden perfume of summer and the gentle hiss of a lazy tide. I stood alone under a clear blue sky, wet sand clinging to my ankles as the innocent sparkle of the sun dazzled off the waves. It had never looked more beautiful. No tragedy, nothing unnatural had ever trespassed here. "Are you all right, lass?" I squinted as a gruff figure approached, his jacket too big, patched and weathered, a fisherman, one of Rafe's old crew. He halted a few steps away, concern furrowing his brow as he studied my face. "Nora? Thade's girl. Ellie's sister, yeah?" He glanced uncertainly at the tide, then back at me, his anxiety deepening the circles under his eyes. "Bless Mary, what are you doing, girl? You weren't think of following your sis, were ye?" "I know," I managed, voice thin. His gaze widened, wary, as if part of him didn't believe I could speak. "Let's get ye home, lass." "Yeah." In the days that followed, I moved through life half awake, wandering the rooms of my family's beaten cottage, absorbed by absence and silence. The fisherman found me again, whose kindness was gentle and a bit awkward, and he offered me a place aboard his trawler, the very ship Rafe once commanded. I joined the crew, not as a figure of authority, but as callous hands to mend nets, haul crates, and steady hearts as we ventured onto Mirror. The work was hard and cold, the water sometimes restless, but I found a strange comfort in the repetition, and a sense of belonging in the rowdy brotherhood of the crew. When the catch was poor, I found myself meandering to the cemetery on the hillside, wind tugging at my coat as I stood before rows of faded stones. I left flowers and mourned for the ones I'd lost, anticipating when the next body would wash ashore. But inexplicably, no more went missing. No deaths, no funerals, no blue boys. Never again. Whatever dread had gripped our town had loosened its grip. Nights would bring strange, vivid dreams, glimpses of an ancient city far beneath the waves, of pale sirens trailing red hair through coral towers, of songs echoing from impossible depths to soothe far more impossible creatures. I awoke each morning struck by a fierce sense of longing and relief. Most unexpectedly, I became friends with a new lighthouse keeper, a younger man, recently arrived from across the strait, who brought unknown wonders of the world, one of which was a computer. He welcomed me into the lighthouse's warming light, and on quiet afternoons, invited me to a studio deep in the basement, where canvas and paint replaced charts and science. His enthusiasm for art and color restored something bright inside me, if only for a while. With time, I found solace, and maybe joy in the strokes of pencil and brush, turning my restless nights and haunted dreams into drawings and stories. At first, I sketched quietly, afraid someone might glimpse the strange visions that spill from my sleep. Haunting monsters and scaly women with bright eyes, ships collapsing beneath storms, villages swarmed with brine. My books grew thick, and soon the keeper discovered my hobby. He encouraged me, offering up empty walls and blank canvases for my work as the whole town took notice of a sometimes storyteller, sometimes artist, occasionally mad, young woman among them. Recognition brought a thrill, a sort of pride in the way men would leave me flowers, or how shopkeepers begged for a tale at closing hour. But that pride quickly soured into a yearning I could not deny. My home was growing stale. Every face became too familiar. Every grave and grace was counted. My work ached for wider eyes, for a world beyond fog and water. So, at the words of traveling merchants and my peers, I packed what little I owned and set out for the mainland. London. What a change it was. Frantic energy, the clang of its streets, the endless faces and lights that chased memories away. I struggled, hawking my art at anyone who would look, until galleries and magazines paid attention to the strange. Quiet artists from afar, lonely shore, a silent girl from a wailing sea, painting monsters and penning fables. People found me fascinating. I tasted enough success to lay a banquet. My work hung in bookstores. My name was whispered at readings and galas. Strangers sought my signature, and yet, even amid the noise and adulation, I found an old, ancient longing tug at me every time my eyes fell upon one of my paintings. Its hunger lived on in my colors, saddened when each story ended, and despite all I had gained, I never felt whole, for there was always some haunting emptiness waiting beyond the edge of my canvas. The vivid dreams that once kindled my creativity soon began to fade, then vanished altogether, as if my body had forgotten how. Soon, I could not even sleep, and my nights became dry, endless vigils. It drove me to the edges of madness. My memoirs and logs grew scattered, fragmented documents written in nighttime scrawls that made no sense come morning. Time lost all substance as one day bled into the next, wakeful and restless. My eyes burned, my hands cramped at the effort of writing, but it could not stave off the deliriums nor the wretched throbbing in my head. So at the edge of the world, I paced an old pier, far from the city's clamor. The night sky was washed with stars, each one glinting atop the dark belly of the sea, and out of those velvet waves rose a song I knew, an old, achingly beautiful melody that threaded through my mind as if calling me home, an overdue dream, a promise not forgotten. A head of red hair plopped up to find me, shining in the moonlight, her pink eyes bright with hope and glee. She outstretched a hand, as she had done years before, and this time I did not hesitate, as I threw myself into the sea. Story 6. The teeth in my grandfather's ashes are my inheritance. I found teeth in my grandfather's ashes. I need you to understand that before I tell you anything else, before I explain how I got here, wherever here is some facility with white walls and doctors who look at me like I'm made of glass, before I tell you about the ship, about the crew, about what happened to them, I need you to know that I found teeth in my grandfather's ashes. Small ones. Too many of them, and they weren't his. The tapping hasn't stopped. Even now, as I write this, I hear it, small, patient, like something knocking on the inside of my skull, waiting to be let in, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That's what the doctors say I do. They say I need to start at the beginning, that writing it down will help me process. They don't know what they're asking. They don't know that some things can't be processed. They can only be survived. And surviving, I've learned, is not the same as winning. My grandfather taught me that. Let me start where it actually began, not in space. That came later. It started in a room that smelled like antiseptic and old flowers, with my grandfather dying in a bed that seemed too small for the man he used to be. There's a photo my grandfather kept on his mantle until the day he died. In it, I'm 7 years old, holding a garter snake I'd caught in the backyard. My smile is so wide it looks painful. The snake is coiled around my wrist like a bracelet, and I'm presenting it to the camera like a trophy, like proof of something. That's my Eli, he'd say, whenever someone noticed it. Afraid of nothing. And for a while, that was true. I was the kid who picked up beetles and let them crawl across his palms while other children shrieked. The one who climbed to the highest branch of the oak tree in Mrs. Patterson's yard just to see if I could, never once considering what would happen if I fell. I chased other kids around the playground with earthworms dangling from my fingers, drunk on the power of their disgust. I remember the feeling of it, that reckless, stupid bravery. It buzzed in my chest like a second heartbeat. Every scraped knee was a badge. Every close call was a story. I threw myself at the world with both hands, certain it would catch me. My grandfather loved this about me. He'd watch me scale fences and jump from heights that made other parents gasp. And he'd just shake his head with this look on his face. Pride, yes, but something else too. Something I didn't recognize until much later. Envy. He was already old by then, though I didn't think of him that way. To me, he was just Grandpa, solid and permanent, smelling of pipe tobacco and Old Spice, with hands like leather and a voice that could fill a room without raising above a murmur. He'd served in Vietnam. He had a Medal of Honor in a glass case in his study, though he never talked about it unless I asked. And I always asked, "Tell me about the war." I begged, curled up on his lap or sprawled across the floor of his study. "Tell me about the time you saved everyone." And he would. God help me, he would. The stories varied in their details, but never in their shape. There was always a patrol. There was always an ambush. Chaos, gunfire, men screaming in the dark. And in the center of it all, my grandfather, calm, clear-eyed, impossibly brave. He carried wounded soldiers through enemy fire. He held the line when everyone else ran. He made impossible shots, impossible choices, and somehow impossibly he walked out alive. "The rest of my unit didn't make it," he'd say, and his voice would go soft in a way that made my chest hurt. "But I got home. I got home so I could meet your grandmother, so you could be here right now. That's why we fight, Eli, so the people we love get their chance." I believed every word. Why wouldn't I? He had the medal. He had the scars, a puckered line along his ribs, a starburst on his left shoulder. He had the nightmares too, though I wasn't supposed to know about those. Sometimes I'd hear him through the wall between our bedrooms, crying out in words I didn't understand in a voice I didn't recognize. In the mornings, he'd make pancakes and ask if I wanted chocolate chips or blueberries, and neither of us would mention what I'd heard. That was the deal we had, the unspoken contract of our household. He gave me stories of heroism. I gave him someone who believed them. He gave me a childhood. I gave him absolution. I didn't know that's what it was back then. I didn't know I was forgiving him for things I couldn't imagine, things he couldn't name. I just knew I wanted to be like him when I grew up, brave, steady, the kind of person who runs toward danger instead of away from it. I wonder sometimes if that's what broke me, wanting so badly to be something I was never meant to be. I don't know exactly when that kid disappeared. It wasn't sudden, not like flipping a switch. It was gradual, like watching a photograph fade in sunlight until you can barely make out what used to be there. The first nightmare came when I was 12. I don't remember what I was dreaming about, only the waking, the sudden, gasping return to consciousness, heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I tried to sit up. I couldn't. My body was locked, frozen. I could feel the sheets against my skin, could see the familiar shadows in my bedroom ceiling, but I couldn't move. Not my arms, not my legs, not even my head. I tried to scream and nothing came out except a thin, reedy whine that didn't sound human. That's when I saw it. There was something in the corner of my room, just a shape, really darker than the darkness around it, like someone had cut a hole in the world. It didn't move. It didn't have to. The wrongness of it radiated outward like heat from a fire, and I knew, with a certainty that went deeper than thought, that it was watching me, that it had been watching me for a long time, that the moment I caught it looking was the moment everything changed. The paralysis broke. I screamed, really screamed this time, and my grandfather came running, and when he flipped on the light, the corner was empty, just my desk, my bookshelf, my collection of baseball caps hanging on hooks. "You were yelling," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Nightmare." I wanted to tell him about the figure, about the paralysis, about the crushing weight on my chest. But looking at him standing there in his old Marine Corps t-shirt, still solid and steady despite his age, I felt ashamed. So I lied. "Yeah, just a nightmare." He sat on the edge of my bed. "Want to talk about it?" "No, I'm fine." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but Elias, there's no shame in being afraid. Fear keeps you alive. It's what you do with it that matters." I nodded, but I didn't believe him, because the figure came back the next night, and the night after that, and soon it wasn't just a figure. It was the walls closing in. It was suffocating. It was dying over and over in the space between sleep and waking. By the time I was 14, I developed what the school counselor called an overactive imagination. I saw threats everywhere. The check engine light in my grandfather's truck meant we were going to crash. The call from the kid, 2 desks, over meant I was going to catch something fatal. Every time a teacher called on me, my throat would close up and my heart would pound so hard I could feel it in my teeth. What are you so afraid of? My grandfather asked once, when I couldn't make myself walk into a school assembly because there were too many people, too many variables, too many ways something could go wrong. I didn't know how to tell him that I was afraid of everything. That fear had crept into me like water into a crack in concrete, freezing and expanding until it broke me open from the inside. I didn't know how to tell him that I woke up most nights at 3 a.m. with a weight on my chest, convinced I was dying, and that sometimes when I closed my eyes, I still saw that shape in the corner, not watching anymore, just waiting. So I just shrugged and said, I don't know. And he looked at me with something in his eyes that might have been recognition, and he nodded slowly, and he said, well, we'll figure it out. We never did. I want to describe this in a way that makes sense. But the truth is that anxiety doesn't make sense. It's not rational. It's not proportional. It's a broken alarm system that never stops ringing, even when there's no fire. There was a girl in my junior year of high school. Her name was Maya, and she had curly hair and laughed at my jokes and once touched my arm in the cafeteria line. And I thought about it for 3 days straight. I wanted to ask her to prom. I had it all planned out. The words, the timing, the backup plan if she said no. I never did it. Every time I got close, I'd feel this surge of panic that made my vision swim. I'd imagine the rejection, not just the word no, but the look on her face, the way she'd tell her friends, the way everyone would know I'd tried and failed. The fear of failure was so much worse than failure itself could ever be, but I couldn't make myself understand that. I'd freeze up, make an excuse, walk away, and then I'd lie awake at night, replaying the moment, hating myself for my cowardice, which only made the next attempt harder. She went to prom with someone else. I didn't go at all. By my 20s, I'd learned to manage it, or at least to hide it. I got a degree in accounting because accountants sit in quiet offices and don't have to give presentations. I found an apartment close enough to my grandfather's house that I could walk there, which was good because driving made my hands shake. I told myself it was because the roads were dangerous, that statistically speaking cars were death traps, that my caution was just common sense. I told myself a lot of things. The truth was simpler and harder. I was afraid. All the time of everything. I was afraid of being seen, of being judged, of being found wanting. I was afraid of the phone ringing, of emails with urgent subject lines, of knocks on the door. I was afraid of crowds and silence, of open spaces and enclosed ones, of the dark and sometimes even the light. I tried therapy. 3 different therapists, actually. They all said variations of the same thing. Breathe through it. Challenge the thoughts. Expose yourself gradually to what scares you. They gave me worksheets and acronyms and exercises that worked for about 15 minutes at a time. They prescribed medication that took the edge off, but left me feeling like I was watching my life through a window instead of living it. None of it fixed the fundamental brokenness at my core. That certainty, deep and immovable, that something was wrong with me, that I was built wrong, that the fearless child who caught snakes and climbed trees had been an imposter, and now the real Elias had emerged, the coward, the failure, the disappointment. My grandfather never said he was disappointed in me. He never had to. He started forgetting things when I was 26. Small things at first, where he'd put his keys, whether he'd taken his pills, what day the garbage went out. I told myself it was normal. He was 83 years old. Everyone forgets things at 83. But then he forgot my name. It was a Thursday. I'd come over to help him with his grocery shopping, the way I did every week. He answered the door and looked at me like I was a stranger, and for a long, terrible moment, I watched him search for recognition that wouldn't come. Eli, I said, "It's Eli, Grandpa." Something clicked behind his eyes. He smiled, but it was wrong. Too wide, too desperate. Eli, he repeated, like he was testing the word. Of course. Come in. The doctors called it vascular dementia. They said it would be slow, then fast, then over. They said to prepare myself. How do you prepare yourself to lose the only person who ever believed you were brave? I moved into his house for the last 6 months of his life. Took a leave from work. That became permanent. Stopped leaving except for essentials. My world shrank to the size of that old Victorian with its creaking floorboards and its smell of pipe tobacco that lingered in every room even though he hadn't smoked in years. Some days he was almost himself. Sharp, present, full of stories. On those days, we'd sit in his study and he'd point to the Medal of Honor in its glass case and tell me about the war, the same stories I'd heard 100 times. And I'd listen like I was hearing them for the first time because maybe each time he told them they changed a little, grew a little more heroic, a little more impossible. Other days, he didn't know where he was. He'd call me by names I didn't recognize, Danny, Lee, a Vietnamese name I couldn't pronounce, and talk to me in urgent, terrified whispers about things that made no sense. Tunnel smoke, the sound of crying in the dark. On those days, I'd hold his hand and tell him he was safe, that he was home, that whatever he was remembering couldn't hurt him anymore. I was lying, but he didn't know that. And neither, really did I. It should have made me feel useful. Instead, I felt like I was watching a building collapse in slow motion, powerless to stop it. The night he died, he was lucid. That's the cruelest part, I think. The disease gave him back to me just long enough to say goodbye, just long enough to tell the truth. He was in his bed. We'd moved it downstairs to the study, surrounded by his books and his medals and his photographs, and he'd been asleep for most of the day, his breathing shallow and uneven. The hospice nurse had been by that afternoon. She'd taken me aside and told me it would be soon, probably tonight, and that I should say whatever I needed to say. So I sat with him. I held his hand, that leather-tough hand that had caught me when I fell from trees, and I talked. I told him I loved him. I told him I was grateful. I told him I was sorry I hadn't turned out the way he'd hoped, that I wasn't brave like him, that I'd let the fear win. And then, around midnight, his eyes opened, not the vague, unfocused look I'd grown used to. This was sharp, present, my grandfather, the real one, looking at me from a long way away. "You're a good boy, Elias," he said finally. "Better than me. Grandpa, they gave me a medal for surviving." His voice was flat, emotionless. "You know what happened to my unit." I shook my head. He closed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Younger, somehow, like the words were coming from a place he'd locked away for 50 years. The stories I told you, about the war, about the ambush, the patrol, the medal. He swallowed hard. They were lies, Eli. All of them. I went cold. "What do you mean?" "We were on patrol. Jungle outside of Da Nang. There were 9 of us. We got ambushed. NVA came out of nowhere. Williams. He was our squad leader. He tried to get us to fall back, but we were surrounded. The shooting started, and I ran." He paused, his breath wheezing. I wanted to tell him to stop, that he didn't need to do this, but something in his expression kept me silent. I found a crater, probably from a mortar strike, and I dove in, just pressed myself into the mud at the bottom. I could hear them screaming. Williams, Martinez, Jackson, all of them screaming for help, for cover fire, for something. And I just laid there with my face in the mud and my hands over my ears, praying it would stop. "Grandpa, you don't have to dash." It did stop, eventually. The shooting stopped and the screaming stopped and everything got quiet. I stayed in that crater for 6 hours, too afraid to move. When I finally climbed out, they were all dead, all 8 of them. Tears were running down his weathered cheeks now, cutting pale tracks through the yellow tint of his skin. I walked back to base alone, told them we'd been ambushed, that I was the only survivor. They called me brave, gave me a fucking medal. But the truth is, I was the only one who survived because I was too much of a coward to die with them. "People say the last survivor is the strongest," he continued, his grip tightening. "They say you have to be tough to make it out alive. But that's bullshit. You know who survived? The weakest. The ones too afraid to stand and fight. The strongest died trying to save us. The weakest lived long enough to regret it. I spent 50 years trying to believe my own bullshit," he said. "Told myself I was brave. Told you I was brave. But the truth is, I'm a coward. Always have been. And cowardice," Eli dashed, his breath rattled. "It's hereditary. The medal, he said, had been a mistake, a clerical error, a miscommunication, a story that got twisted in the retelling. By the time anyone realized what had actually happened, it was easier to let the lie stand. The war needed heroes. The country needed heroes. And my grandfather needed to be able to look himself in the mirror. I started to pull my hand away. He held on. He was crying now. So was I. "I'm sorry," he said. So quietly I almost missed it. "I'm sorry you're like me. I'm so sorry. For all of it. For what I did. For what I passed on to you. For what's coming." "What do you mean, what's coming?" But his eyes had already slipped closed. His grip on my hand loosened. And an hour later, just before dawn, he stopped breathing. I sat with his body until the sun came up. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't feel anything. There was a numbness spreading through me like frostbite, killing everything it touched. The grandfather I'd known, the hero, the legend, the bravest man in the world, had never existed. He'd been a story, a comfortable lie I'd spent my whole life trying to live up to. And now the lie was dead, and the truth was all that remained. Cowardice is hereditary. I went through his things after the funeral. His will left everything to me, the house, the truck, his savings. And one other thing, his final wish was to have his ashes scattered in space. I laughed when I read it. Actually laughed alone in that empty house, because it was so impossibly absurd. My grandfather, who'd barely left the state in 50 years, wanted to go to the stars. It felt like a joke, like one final lie, like he was still trying to be someone he wasn't even in death. But then my uncle called. My uncle Richard worked for a private aerospace company, something in management, important enough that he had pulled, but not important enough that I understood exactly what he did. He'd always been a successful one in the family, the overachiever, the one who'd escaped our small town and made something of himself. We spoke maybe twice a year, usually on holidays, but he was the one who called after the funeral. I saw Dad's will, the space thing. I can make that happen. What do you mean you can make that happen? We've got a research mission launching in 3 months, Richard said. Nothing major. Routine maintenance on a station in high orbit. Some scientific experiments. I can get you a seat. You could bring his ashes, scatter them out there, give the old man his final adventure. I almost said no. The word was right there, ready to fall out of my mouth. But then I thought about my grandfather's confession, about the fear that had consumed both our lives, about that terrible word, hereditary. And I thought, maybe this is my chance. Maybe this is how I break the cycle. There would be other people on the ship. I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Professional astronauts? The best, Richard assured me. A full crew for trained astronauts. You'd basically be a passenger, just there to complete your grandfather's wishes. They'd handle everything else. I closed my eyes. I thought about the boy who caught snakes and climbed trees and thrown himself at the world with both hands. I thought about the man who was afraid of everything. I thought about my grandfather, bleeding out in a ditch, listening to his friends die, and surviving anyway. Okay, I said, I'll do it. The night before I left for training, I went through my grandfather's study one last time. I'd been avoiding it. Too many memories, too many lies. But there were things I needed. His Medal of Honor, which I planned to bring with me. Some photographs. The urn containing his ashes. The urn was heavier than I expected. I almost didn't open it. What was there to see? Ashes were ashes. But something made me do it anyway. Call it morbid curiosity. Call it premonition. Call it whatever you want. I unscrewed the lid and looked inside. Gray powder, fine as sand. That's what I expected. That's not what I found. There were teeth in my grandfather's ashes. Small ones. Too small to be his. These were the teeth of children, of teenagers, of people who had died young. And there were so many of them. Dozens. Maybe more. Scattered to the gray like bones in a graveyard. I should have stopped then. I should have called someone. Told someone. Done anything other than what I actually did. Instead, I closed the urn. I put it in my bag. And I told myself it didn't mean anything. I told myself a lot of things. That night, I dreamed about the shape in the corner of my childhood bedroom. And somewhere very far away, I heard tapping. The training facility was in Nevada, a sprawling complex of hangars and simulators and dormitories that looked like it had been built during the Cold War and never updated. My uncle had pulled strings to get me a spot in an accelerated program. 6 weeks instead of the usual 6 months, which meant I was behind from the moment I arrived. The other trainees looked at me like I was a joke. And honestly, I was. They'd spent years working toward this. I'd spent years avoiding the outside of my apartment. They could recite emergency protocols in their sleep. I had a panic attack the first time they put me in the centrifuge, but I made it through, barely. The psychologist who cleared me for the mission noted significant anxiety markers and possible dissociative tendencies, but ultimately signed off because my uncle's company was footing the bill and I wasn't technically a crew member, just a passenger. A warm body with an urn full of ashes and a rich relative. I didn't meet the actual crew until 2 days before launch. They'd been training together for 8 months by then, a tight unit with their own rhythms and inside jokes and unspoken hierarchies. I was an intruder, an afterthought, the civilian they had to babysit while doing their actual jobs. First was Adana, the pilot. She was 34 years old. With dark hair, she kept cropped short and eyes that seemed to be permanently narrowed, like she was always squinting into a headwind. She'd flown combat missions in the Air Force before transitioning to the private sector, and she carried herself with the coiled energy of someone who'd learned to turn fear into fuel. When she walked into a room, the room noticed. She shook my hand with a grip that was just slightly too firm. Elias, heard about you. Her tone made it clear what she'd heard wasn't flattering. Ever been in space before? No. Ever want to go to space? Not really, no. She almost smiled. At least you're honest. Most tourists pretend they're excited. Just follow instructions and don't touch anything without asking. That was Adana, blunt, abrasive, and utterly unwilling to pretend things were better than they were. Most people found her difficult. I found her exhausting in a way that felt almost familiar, like looking at a photograph of someone I used to be. The fearless kid who picked up snakes. The one who charged headfirst into danger. She'd been like that once, I suspected. Maybe she still was. And I hated her for it, just a little, because I'd lost that part of myself and she hadn't. It should have made me angry. It should have made me want to prove her wrong. Instead, it made me feel exactly as small and worthless as I'd always suspected I was. I spent the first 3 days avoiding her, pressing myself against walls whenever she walked by, making myself as invisible as possible. But avoidance is impossible in space. And eventually I learned that Adana's anger wasn't really about me at all. I didn't find out about her brother until later. His name was Alexei. He'd been a pilot too, not as good as Adana, but good enough. 11 months before our launch, his plane had gone down during a training exercise. Mechanical failure, they said. Nothing anyone could have done. Adana didn't believe that. Adana believed someone had fucked up maintenance and oversight, and that her brother had paid the price for their incompetence. She'd spent months trying to find answers, filing complaints, demanding investigations. When none of that worked, she'd signed up for this mission. Next was Dr. Marshall, the medical officer. He was 51, soft-spoken, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the sort of patient demeanor that made you want to tell him things. Not in a pushy way. He never pried. He just listened, really listened, in a way that most people don't. He shook my hand gently. Don't worry about Adana. Her bark's worse than her bite. Well, usually. I heard that. Adana called from across the room. Marshall grinned. How are you feeling about the flight? Terrified, I admitted. That's normal. I was terrified my first time. Still get nervous, honestly. But that's good. It means you're taking it seriously. Fear keeps you sharp. That's what my grandfather used to say. It didn't comfort me then either. I've been reviewing your file. I hope you don't mind. My file, medical records, psychological evaluations, the notes from your training. He held up a hand before I could protest. Standard procedure for any crew member. I need to know what I'm working with in case of emergencies. I felt my face flush. All my failures, documented and quantified. Panic attacks, 17. Dissociative episodes, 3. Recommended for mission, marginally. So you know I'm a mess, I said. I know you're struggling, he corrected gently. There's a difference. He leaned forward. Elias, I've spent 20 years studying how people respond to extreme environments. You want to know what I've learned? I nodded, not trusting my voice. The people who do best in crisis situations aren't the ones without fear. They're the ones who've learned to function despite it. Fear is just information, your brain telling you to pay attention. The question is what you do with that information. And what do I do with it? He smiled. Right now, you freeze. You retreat. You assume the worst and act accordingly. He paused. But that's a learned response, Elias, which means it can be unlearned. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But I'd heard versions of his speech from 3 different therapists, and none of them had been able to fix the fundamental brokenness at my core. What if it can't? I asked, what if I'm just like this? Dr. Marshall was quiet for a moment. Then he said, my daughter was born with a heart defect. Spent the first 3 years of her life in and out of hospitals. The doctors told us she might not make it, that we should prepare for the worst. He took off his glasses and cleaned them on his shirt, a nervous habit I'd later learn. She's 16 now, plays soccer, drives her mother crazy. Every day with her is a gift I didn't think I'd get. That's wonderful, I said, unsure where he was going. It is, but here's the thing. I spent those 3 years making deals with God, with the universe, with anyone who would listen. I said, if she lives, I'll be a better person. If she lives, I'll dedicate my life to helping others. If she lives, I'll never ask for anything again. He put his glasses back on. And when she got better, I kept those promises. Went into aerospace medicine so I could help people in impossible situations. Every patient I treat, every life I help save, it's part of the bargain. A deal. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what I do, Elias. I make deals. If I work hard enough, bad things won't happen. If I prepare enough, I can prevent disaster. If I'm good enough, the universe will be fair. He shook his head. It's not rational. I know that, but I can't stop doing it. It's the only way I know how to cope. I understood that too. The desperate need to believe that effort could prevent catastrophe. That if you just did everything right, you'd be safe. Dr. Marshall believed in me. Really believed in me. In a way that felt almost painful. He saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. Some potential, some strength. And he kept trying to coax it out. You're stronger than you think, he said to me once. You're here, Elias. Whatever brought you here, whatever you're running from or toward, you made the choice to show up. That counts for something. I wanted to tell him that I hadn't chosen anything, that I'd been pushed and pulled by forces beyond my control, that I was only here because I was too afraid to say no. But the way he looked at me made me want to believe him instead. That was Marshall's gift. He made you feel like you could be better than you were. I wanted so badly to be the person he saw. I wanted so badly to deserve his faith. Over the following weeks, Dr. Marshall became my anchor. He checked on me every day, not with clinical detachment, but with genuine warmth. He listened when I needed to talk and sat in comfortable silence when I didn't. He taught me breathing techniques that actually worked, and when I had panic attacks, which I did twice, he talked me through them with steady patience. You're going to be okay, he told me once, his hand on my shoulder while I gasped for breath that wouldn't come. This will pass. Everything passes. Dr. Marshall believed in bargains. He believed that if you were good enough, careful enough, devoted enough, you could negotiate with fate, that there was a deal to be made, a price to be paid, and if you paid it faithfully, the universe would keep its end. He was wrong. Naomi was a ship's engineer, and she was the hardest to know. She was 43, Chinese American, with long dark hair. She kept in a perpetual braid, and a face that gave away nothing. When I first met her, I thought she was cold, distant, aloof, the kind of person who'd rather be alone with machines than with people. I was wrong. Naomi wasn't cold. She was just Somewhere else. Is she always like that? I asked Marshall quietly. Yeah, don't take it personally. She's just very focused. And going through some stuff, I think. Stuff. He hesitated. Personal stuff. We're all dealing with something. That's why we're here instead of with our families. Easy to work on Thanksgiving and sit at a table pretending everything's fine. I hadn't realized the launch was scheduled for Thanksgiving week. Another layer of weight I didn't need. Naomi told me herself on the fourth night of the mission. I couldn't sleep. The nightmares had started again, dark shapes and tapping sounds, and my grandfather's voice whispering words I couldn't understand. And I wandered to the observation deck to stare at the stars. Naomi was already there, floating in the zero gravity with her back to the viewport, her face illuminated by the distant light of 1 billion suns. You can't sleep either, she said. It wasn't a question. No. I grabbed a handhold and pulled myself to a stop beside her. You! I don't sleep much anymore. She was quiet for a moment. When I close my eyes, I see things I'd rather not see. I nodded. I understood that better than she knew. Why did you sign up for this mission? I asked, why space? Why here specifically? She turned to look at me, and in the starlight her face looked ancient, hollowed out, like someone had scooped everything soft out of her and left only the structure behind. Because down there hurts too much, she said simply, and then without prompting, without any indication that she wanted to talk, she told me about her son. His name was Oliver. He was 4 years old. He had Naomi's eyes and his father's laugh, and a stuffed elephant named Trumpet that he took everywhere. 2 years ago, he'd been diagnosed with a brain tumor, inoperable, terminal. The doctors gave him 6 months. He lasted 4. When I sleep, I dream about him. Her voice was flat, affectless. And in the dreams, he's always alive, always happy. And then I wake up, and for about 3 seconds, I don't remember. I reach for my phone to check on him. And then I remember, and I have to lose him all over again. She paused. So I don't sleep. It's easier. That sounds... I couldn't find the right word. Horrible. Impossible. Familiar. The last thing he said to me was, "I'm tired, Mama," Naomi said, her voice perfectly level, and I told him it was okay to rest. And he closed his eyes, and he didn't open them again. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the tears floating away from my face in tiny, weightless globules. My husband left after the funeral, she continued. Couldn't stand to be around me anymore. I reminded him too much of Oliver. Everything reminded me too much of Oliver. The house, the city, the whole planet. She gestured at the stars outside. So I came here, where there's nothing to remind me, where I can just work, exist, not think. Does it help? She was quiet for a long time. No, she said finally, but it's quieter. The grief is still there, but it's muffled, like hearing someone scream from very far away. She paused. Sometimes I forget to feel anything at all, and that's almost like peace. I want to say something meaningful, something that would help, but what do you say to someone who's lost everything? What words could possibly matter? I'm sorry, I said, because it was true even if it wasn't enough. Don't be. She turned back to the stars. I'm not looking for pity. I'm not looking for anything. I just wanted you to understand. Understand what? Why I'm not afraid. She smiled, and it was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. The worst thing that could possibly happen to me already happened. Everything else is just... She trailed off. Naomi wasn't running from death. She was waiting for it. Patiently, quietly, the way you wait for a bus you know is coming. She'd already said goodbye to everything that mattered. When the end came for her, she didn't fight it. She just let go. Part of me wonders if that was always the plan. The last crew member was Captain Hesse. Captain Hesse was 62 years old, though he didn't look it. He had the kind of face that seemed carved from something durable. Granite, maybe, or old oak. Gray hair cropped military short. Eyes the color of winter sky. When he shook my hand, his grip was firm but not aggressive. The handshake of a man who had nothing to prove. He reminded me of my grandfather in the good years, before the sickness. Steady, unshakable, His record was impeccable, his reputation unimpeachable, his calm so profound it felt like a force of nature. When he spoke, people listened, not because he demanded it, but because he'd earned it. Elias. He shook my hand with both of his. I'm sorry for your loss. Your grandfather sounds like he was an impressive man. He was, I said, and left it at that. I've reviewed your file. I know this isn't easy for you, but I want you to know you're not cargo. You're part of this crew, even if you're only with us temporarily. If you need anything, if you're struggling, you tell me. No shame in it. Understood? I nodded, surprised by the tightness in my throat. Good. Welcome aboard, Elias. Later, I learned that Captain Hesse had lost his wife 3 years earlier, that he'd requested deep space assignment specifically because being on Earth felt like drowning in memories, that his acceptance wasn't wisdom, it was armor, a way of surviving loss so profound that any other response would have destroyed him. He never talked about her, not once, in all the weeks we spent together. But sometimes I'd catch him staring at a photograph he kept in his quarters, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, laughing at something outside the frame. And the look on his face was the loneliest thing I'd ever seen. The weeks of training passed faster than I expected. It wasn't easy. Nothing about it was easy. The zero-gravity simulations made me sick. The emergency drills triggered panic attacks that I had to hide in the bathroom afterward. The technical briefings were so dense with information that my head ached by the end of each day. But slowly, incrementally, I started to feel like I might actually survive this. The crew helped. Captain Hesse with his steady patience. Dr. Marshall with his unwavering faith. Even Adana, who stopped glaring at me quite so much after I managed to complete an emergency protocol without freezing up. Not bad, she said afterward, which from her was practically a compliment. And Naomi, in her quiet way, taught me how to find peace in the mechanical rhythms of the ship, how to focus on small tasks when the big picture felt overwhelming, how to be useful, even if I wasn't essential. We ate together, trained together, swapped stories late at night. I learned that Captain Hesse had a dog named Murphy waiting for him back home, and that he talked to it over video calls every Sunday. I learned that Adana collected vintage aviation patches and could recite the specifications of every fighter jet ever built. I learned that Dr. Marshall made terrible puns and laughed at his own jokes like a child, and that Naomi could solve Rubik's Cubes in under a minute, and one spent 3 hours teaching me how to do it. I never got faster than 12 minutes. They became real to me. Not just crew members, not just symbols, but people, complicated, broken, trying their best people. People I was starting to care about. That made everything that came later so much worse. The night before launch, I almost told them about the teeth. We were in the common room, all 5 of us, sharing a last meal before the chaos of the morning. Someone had smuggled in a bottle of champagne, and we were passing around, taking small sips, saying things that felt too big for the moment. And I almost said it. Almost said, there's something wrong with his ashes. There are teeth in them, small teeth, too many teeth. And I don't know what they mean, but I think they mean something terrible. I think my grandfather did something in the war that he never told me about, something worse than running, something that left marks. And I'm scared that whatever he was carrying has attached itself to me somehow, that I'm bringing something up here that I shouldn't, that we're all in danger and it's my fault. I thought about my grandfather then, about the men he'd left behind in that jungle, the screams he'd listened to from his hiding place, about the difference between surviving and living. I thought, maybe there isn't one, but I didn't say any of that, because saying it would have meant acknowledging it, and I wasn't ready for that. I was still telling myself the teeth were a mistake, the contamination at the crematorium, something with a rational explanation. I was still in denial. I wonder sometimes if things would have been different if I'd spoken up, if I'd trusted them with the truth. Maybe they would have called off the mission. Maybe we would have all gone home. Maybe they'd still be alive. Story 7. 3 patient knocks at my door. I still do not know what I saw that night. I only know it looked like someone had tried to build a person out of a person. And whatever they built was not alive in the way we are alive. I live alone in a small 3rd-floor apartment building that smells like old carpet and fried onions. It is the kind of place where the pipes announce themselves at 2 in the morning, and the light in the stairwell blinks as if deciding whether to bother. The neighbors keep their doors shut and their curtains closed, and that is how I liked it. One October night, I fell asleep on the couch watching something that made antelopes look majestic. I woke to soft knocking, then 3 precise knocks again. My first thought was a drunk delivery guy, but it was 2 in the morning. I did not answer. The knocks repeated, patient like someone counting. I checked the peephole. The hallway was empty. The far light flickered slowly, not from motion, but like someone was standing between its bulb and the sensor. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Keller, the old woman upstairs, said, "Do not open your door." I heard it too. Stay inside. Her next message was shorter. Do not speak. Something slid across the carpet outside my door. Not footsteps. A soft dragging, as if canvas or clothing was being pulled flat. Then the voice. It said, "Help me." It sounded like Mrs. Keller. It sounded like the way her voice had been the 2 times she asked me to pass her parcel. But there was something wrong with how it said it. The vowels came out wrong. Too round. Like someone playing a voice on repeat and slowing it down a little too much. I covered my mouth with my hand because any noise felt dangerous. The thing did not try to force the lock. It scratched through it slowly, then stopped. For a long time, nothing happened. The silence was heavy enough to hear the water heater clicking. I called the police, and they came. They made polite faces and fumbled with flashlights. They checked the building. They checked the stairwell. They knocked on doors. Mrs. Keller opened hers wrapped in a robe and said she had heard something too. She said she was fine. The officers left a shrug and a warning that the building had old wiring and things like that. They left. I locked my door and sat on the couch with every light on. I told myself to sleep. I told myself the voice was a prank. Maybe a neighbor with a bad sense of humor. Maybe a drunk. I kept replaying the cadence of those words. Help me, help me. The phrase echoed in the hollow place behind my ribs. Later, after the sun had started to lift some gray into the sky, something moved outside my window. I looked and saw a dark shape standing in the stairwell near the laundry room. It was small, like a child, but not a child. It did not move so much as inhabit the space, leaning in a way humans lean when they try to listen better. I opened my balcony door an inch. The smell hit me like a physical thing. It smelled like Mrs. Keller's perfume, the cheap floral one she always wore, mixed with a clean chemical scent of a hospital. There was a faint metallic undernote. I gagged. I am ashamed to admit I vomited in the sink and then washed my face because the thing inside me was equal parts curiosity and terror. When I peered down the stairwell, the thing turned its head. It had hair stitched into a cap. I thought briefly that was impossible. Then I saw what looked like clothes patched together in a hurry, a cardigan with one sleeve the wrong color. Up close its face was a suggestion of a face, nothing like the smooth detail of a living person, but close enough to be dreadful. There were seams at the jawline, and a line of small repairs along one cheek. Its mouth opened with a jerk, and it said thank you in a voice that might have been a whisper of 100 recorded thanks layered over each other. It did not move like a human. It moved like an actor trying to remember someone else's mannerisms, but there were human rhythms in it. I noticed a faint rise and fall at the neck like breathing. I heard, if I listened very close, a slow shudder like a pulse. It was enough to make me believe that something human had been used to make it. I called Mrs. Keller on my cell. Her number went straight to voicemail. I texted a single sentence, "Are you okay?" Her reply came in 3 minutes. There was only one word. No. I did not know what I expected, but when the thing on the stairs began to climb them, I panicked in a way that felt older than fear. It moved with sudden, jerky efficiency that would have been comic if it were not so scary. It did not walk on the balls of its feet. It migrates, I thought, because the way it shifted weight felt like puzzle pieces being adjusted. It reached my door and paused. Then it knocked. 3 precise knocks. It whispered my name. My name leaked out as if it had been reading a sticky note. It said it in a voice threaded through with someone else's laugh. Someone I could have known. I could have opened, I suppose. I could have unlocked the door and ripped it open and thrown myself out. Screamed until someone came. Instead, I sat there and watched the shadow pool at the bottom of the door like a spill. It tried to speak like a neighbor, like a woman. Like anyone, it tried to apologize, to ask for help, to confess a secret. It learned words and used them one after another until they were no longer words, but a texture. I realized then that whatever it was had been made to copy. It copied speech, gestures, the scraping of a shoe against carpet. It copied because it did not understand. Once, in a voice that sounded like it had been sewn from several old voicemails, it said I needed to be built right. I understood the sentence, and also did not. It sounded like a repair shop phrase in prayer. When it finally left, it did not leave by walking down the hall. It folded itself small and slid under my door, as if the building were the sort of place a person could be flattened and carried like a coat. When the light changed in the hall, its shadow pulled away, and the carpet was clean where it had been. I reported it. I called the police again. They came and took reports. They listened to my voice get smaller at the end of sentences, and wrote down my words with polite, blank faces. They walked the halls with flashlights. No one found footprints that could not be explained. The officers told me to get a security camera. They told me to sleep at a friend's place. They warned me about how the city gets strange things in old buildings. I moved out 2 days later. I did not pack much. I left a handful of things behind and a note on the door that said, "Please check on Mrs. Keller." I drove without turning on the radio, and I did not look in the rearview mirror. 2 weeks after I left, I saw a video someone posted online from a different city. It was a shaky clip of a shadow in a laundromat that twisted like someone trying to wear too many coats at once. The comments were full of jokes and speculation. Someone said it looked like a costume. Someone else said it was an artist. In the end, what keeps me awake is not the memory of the thing itself. It is the idea that something could be assembled out of people and not be a person. It is a thought that whatever built it wanted it to look human enough to be trusted and not human enough to be mistaken for one. If you ever hear 3 patient knocks at 2 in the morning, please do not open the door. And if you hear a voice that sounds familiar, remember that imitation is not the same as life. Story 8. The Nightmare That Came to Reality. This happened to me the other night. It gave me quite the fright. First it came for me in my dreams, then grabbed my throat in reality. It all happened just a few nights ago, and I am still freaked out. The night started abnormally. I brushed my teeth, then went and found my fat orange cat. I put him on the bed and started up my nighttime thunderstorm noises. It wasn't long before sleep overcame me. My cat creamed purring between my feet. I am blind, just so you know, though in my dreams I can see. I dream in color, you see, and sometimes I can even read. I was sitting in my dream house when I became aware and looked around with staring eyes, trying to take in everything I could see. Lucid dreaming is rare for me, but when it happens, it gives me a chance to see. Before I could decide what to do with this dream, there came a knocking at my front door. The house fell still. My stomach twisted as if I were ill. When lucid dreaming, I never fear the unknown. After all, it is my dream I have control, right? So it didn't take me long to go to the door, to find out what all the knocking was for. The knob twisted in my hand, and the door began to open. I had a smile of greeting on my face before it was laid to waste. What pushed its way inside was terrible and made me want to hide. I felt my inside shrivel as my Oakwood hall was consumed by lack of light, something beyond darkness, and it was filled with hate. The feeling of its gaze made me quake and shiver. My eyes were drawn to the center of the lack of light, where a silhouette of something could barely be gleamed. It was the dark eyes that ensnared me. I felt it in a pressure of malice. It forced its way in me, filling my mind with thoughts of loss and giving up, It wanted me to defeat myself. I was lucid though, and I tried to will it away. That didn't work, and I could see the white gleam of a pointy-toothed smile in that center of lightlessness. I am a person with many tools, and if the screwdriver doesn't work, just meant it was time for the hammer. I am a spiritual person. Many call me a beacon. In my life, attacks have happened before. On my finger rests a ring of sacred geometry made of silver. First, the thoughts of defeat had to go, so I thought of victories and loved to offset the negative thoughts. It took a lot to accomplish, but once I could think, clear planning could occur. The thing had made most of its way inside. Stopping and rejecting it was a goal. My arm felt like it was pushing against a full-force waterfall as I raised my fist at the monster. I remember quite well a preacher from a book about a vampire. He raised a cross to the undead, and it broke the cross, telling the preacher that the symbol meant nothing without faith. That would not be me, so I poured my faith in my God into my ring. Then I felt a need to say the name. I tried in vain. My mouth opened, but no sound could escape my throat. A pressure built, and my built-up fate flickered. In my dream, it was seen as a blue-white intense light that had built upon my fist. The word could not be resisted. Once thought it wanted to be spoken. The name of my God almost climbed its way out with my voice. The first syllable stuttered twice, but finally it was said, and it felt nice. The smile turned to rage as the monster screamed. Then something was drawn from me into my ring and projected forth. It caught the invader and flung it from my home. The door slammed and I awoke covered in sweat and needed to pee. First thing I noticed was that cream was gone. I got out of bed with a sigh. The worst part of lucid dreaming for me is waking back to a world where I am blind. I memorized my route to the bathroom long ago. I washed my hands and headed back to bed. In my doorway, I stopped with dread in my heart. The presence from my dream was standing in front of me. Mates, if I hadn't just gone pee, I would have right there. I have faced spirits and I have faced nightmares, but never both at the same time. Nothing had ever come out of a nightmare to approach me in reality. The only thing my tired mind could think to do was what I just had done in the dream. I made a fist and once again tried to raise it. The force pushed against me stronger than the dream. It had managed to piss me off, though. I am not a morning person. So with thoughts of screw this effing thing running through my head, I raised my arm. The faith built again, but this time I felt a grip on my throat. It squeezed and the first syllable of the name failed to speak. I forced everything I had into saying a name that seemed to really upset it. I forced the name through my lips. It was soft-spoken at first, then when the pressure lifted it was screamed. Then I went further. I commanded that in the name it leaves and put all my intent to either see it gone or dead into my voice. With the faith and the name beside me, I had become the predator. It fled then, and I felt it leave my home. I crawled back into bed and went to sleep, too tired from the effort to stay awake, and hoped I would sleep peacefully. I did. The next day, I had almost forgotten about it when my housemate asked me about the bruising on my throat. He thought I had just run into something, and since he isn't a believer, I didn't feel like telling him. Now I am here posting because I am curious. What do you think it was? My money is on Demon, but it could have been something else. Never before have I had my dreams invaded like that. Makes me feel kind of icky inside, knowing that thing was trying to break in. How long had it been there before it made itself known? I am not sure, but I am sure I don't want to know the answer to that question. Let me know, mates, and remember, don't go to bed without protection. Story 9. Never walk home alone from school during a flood. When I was still just a teenager, my family and I had moved from our home in England to the Irish countryside. We lived on the outskirts of a very small town, surrounded by nothing else but farms, country roads, along with several rivers and tributaries. I was far from happy to be living here, as not only did I miss the good life I had back home, but in the Irish Midlands, there was basically nothing to do. A common stereotype of Ireland is that it always rains, and as someone who lived here for 6 years, the stereotype is well deserved. After a handful of months living here, It was now early November, and with it came very heavy and nonstop rain. In fact, the rain was so heavy this month, the surrounding rivers had flooded into the town and adjoining country roads. On the day this happened, I had just come out from school and began walking home. Approaching the road which leads out of town and toward my house, I then see a large group of people having gathered around. Squeezing my way through a crowd of town folk, annoyingly blocking my path. I'm then surprised to see the road to my house is completely flooded with water. After asking around, I then learn the crowd of people are also wanting to get to their homes. But because of the flood, they and I have to wait for a tractor to come along and ferry everyone across, a pair at a time. Being the grouchy teenager I was then, I was in no mood to wait around for a tractor ride when all I want to do is get home and binge TV. And so, turning around, I head back into the town square to try and find my own way back home. Walking all the way to the other end of town, I then cut down a country road, which I knew eventually lead to my house. And thankfully, this road had not yet been flooded. Continuing for around 5 minutes down this road, I then come upon a small stone arch bridge. But unfortunately for me, the bridge had been closed off by traffic cones, where standing in front of them was a soaking wet policeman, ready to accept defeat and head all the way back into town. A bit of Irish luck thankfully came to my aid. A Jeep had only just pulled up to the crossroads, driven by a man in a farmer's cap with a border collie sat in the passenger seat. Leaving his post by the bridge, the policeman then approaches the farmer's Jeep, seeming to know him and his dog. It was a small town after all. With the policeman now distracted, I saw an opportunity to cross the bridge, and being the rebellious little shite I did just that, comedically tiptoeing my way toward the bridge, all the while keeping an eye out for the policeman, still chatting with the farmer through the Jeep window. I then cross over the bridge and hurtle down the other side. However, when I get there, I then see why the bridge was closed off in the first place. On this side of the bridge, the stretch of country road in front of it was entirely flooded with brown, murky water. In fact, the road was that flooded, I almost mistook for a river. Knowing I was only a 20-minute walk from reaching my house, I rather foolishly decided to take a chance and enter the flooded road, continuing on my quest. After walking for only a couple of minutes, I was already waist deep in the freezing cold water, and considering the smell, I must have been trudging through more than just mud. The further I continue along the flooded road, my body shivering as I do, the water around me only continues to rise, where I then resort to carrying my school bag overhead. Still wading my way through the very deep flood, I feel no closer to the road outside my house, leading me to worry I have accidentally taken the wrong route home. Exhausted, shivering, and a little afraid for my safety, I now thankfully recognize a tall, distant tree that I regularly pass on my way to school. Feeling somewhat hopeful, I continue onwards through the flood, and although the fear of drowning was still very much real, I now began to have a brand new fear. But unlike before, this fear was rather unbeknown. Whether out of some primal instinct or not, I twirled carefully around the water to face the way I came from, where I see the long bending river of the flooded road. But in the distance, protruding from the brown, rippling surface, maybe 20 or even 30 meters away, I catch sight of something else. Or should I say, someone else? What I see is a man, either in his late 30s or early 40s, standing in the middle of the flooded road. His hair was a damp blonde or brown, and he appeared to be wearing a black trench coat or something similar. But the disturbing thing about this stranger's appearance was that while his right sleeve was submerged beneath the water, the left sleeve was completely armless. What I mean is, the man's left sleeve, not submerged like its opposite, was tied up high into a knot beneath the shoulder. If it wasn't startling enough to see a strange one-armed man appear in the middle of a flooded road, I then noticed something about him that was far more alarming. When I first lay eyes on this stranger, I mistake him as being rather heavy. But on further inspection, I then realized the one-armed man wasn't heavy at all. If anything, he looked just like a dead body that had been pulled from a river. What I mean is, the man looked unnaturally bloated. As one can imagine, I was more than a little terrified. Unaware who this strange, grotesque man even was, I wasn't going to hang around and find out. Quickly shifting around, I try and move as fast as I can to the water's current, hoping to God this bloated phantom would not follow behind. although I never once looked back to see if he was still there. Thankfully, by the time the daylight was slowly beginning to fade, I had reached not only the end of the flood, but also the safety of the road directly outside my house. Already worried half to death by my late arrival, I never bothered to tell my parents about the one-armed stranger I encountered. After all, considering the man's unnatural appearance, I wasn't even myself sure if what I saw was a real flesh and blood man, or if it was something else. Story 10. My night in the Caraway house went wrong. The Caraway house was there long before I was born. I remember my grandfather telling me how he used to play ding-dong ditch. It was a badge of honor who could get the most swears from the irritated homeowners. Grandfather proudly showed off the scar he got from the pan thrown at his head. The old bungalow loomed over the town high on a hill at night. Its lit windows glowed like the eyes of a beast, watching over us with the patience of an immortal being. Ivy climbed its brick walls like a second skin. Trash dotted the overgrown lawn. Beer cans and condoms. Every time I passed it, even from a distance, I could smell the place. The stale scent of mold carried on the wind. It was as if the place was rotting from the inside. An eyesore, my mother called it, and yet nothing was done about it. No one condemned it or did welfare checks on the aged owners. The Caraways had influenced, my parents said, whatever that meant. From the few glimpses I caught of them, I couldn't see how. Mr. Caraway, a squat man, more fat than sense, always walked around in a filthy wife-beater vest. Grease and coffee stains painted him like a pattern, paired with cargo shorts that revealed pale, balloon-like legs. He looked, for lack of a better term, like an off-duty clown. Mrs. Caraway, on the other hand, was made from plastic. A Barbie doll left out in the sun for too long. Her wrinkly jowls were pulled back with Botox. Her gnashing teeth shined like porcelain. Looking at her just felt wrong, especially when she stood next to her husband, a funhouse mirror couple. Every weekend they came into town. Mr. Caraway touched everything in display cases, leaving a trail of greasy handprints in his wake, while Mrs. Caraway shrieked her shrill laugh. The town agreed they were a nuisance, but nothing was done, whether from fear or the supposed influence. I couldn't tell you. Then something happened. 2 months had passed. The couple hadn't been seen since. They were still in the house. Every night, thick black smoke billowed from the chimney, filling the dark sky like fog, permeating the air with an acrid burnt smell. It clung to your clothes, burnt the hairs of your nostrils. People didn't care, as long as the couple no longer bothered them. The Caraway house was an old, dilapidated house, owned by a strange couple gone missing. So, why am I writing about it? Because I'm going to break inside. Not by myself, of course. I have friends tagging along. Safety in numbers, as they say. Alvin, my next-door neighbor, was a squirrely, hyperactive kid, raised on the iPad. He jumped when I mentioned going to the house, but insisted on filming it. Why? I asked, frowning at his cheap handheld camera. For YouTube, he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. We could be the next Sam and Colby. I scoffed at it. It sounded like a stupid idea to me, but I let him bring the camera, if only to keep him quiet. If he did upload to YouTube, I doubt it would get many views. He'd better not do that stupid Wojak face for the thumbnail. My other friend, Harris Simmons, was, unfortunately, a wimp, no other way to say it, smaller than the rest of the kids in class, jumping at every sound, and with yellow skin. It made him a prime target for bullies. Born with jaundice, it gave him skin like candle wax, that and his initials earned him the nickname Homer Simpson. Alvin still called him that, much to his chagrin. It wasn't as bad as the other nickname, fetal alcohol syndrome. Besides that, he was a good kid, went along with anything, even exploring a weird, scary house. I asked him if he truly was all right. He once admitted that the Caraways gave him night terrors. Harris nodded, his blonde hair flopping. I'll be fine. It might cure me of my nightmares. I wasn't so sure about that. As we walked up the overgrown path, lined by thorny bushes, I could see Harris getting nervous. His waxy skin glowed with sweat. Guys, I don't know, he muttered, the wind whipping away his words. This seemed like a good idea during the day. Do we have to do this at night? Alvin scoffed. It isn't night yet. He pointed his camera up at the violet sky. Harris tooted. Whatever. It's going to be in a few minutes. And what if the old woman catches us? No chance. My brother said she was taken away. Alvin reassured. When? Alvin shrugged. I don't know. He said she was stalking the streets, singing and chasing after cars. Taken by who? Alvin shrugged. Police, ambulance, nut house, does it matter? I guess not. Harris wasn't convinced, biting down on his golden lip. I bumped shoulders with him. Hey, try not to worry. If anything goes wrong, we'll protect you. I glanced at Alvin, currently doing 360 spins with his eye stuck to the camera. Well, I will, anyway. Harris offered a shaky nod, shuffling along with his hands clasped. I gave him another reassuring pat. Then, Alvin dropped his clunky camera, followed by a torrent of swears. Harris jumped. Frowning at their friend, they traipsed through the overgrown brush, snapping twigs and crushing beer cans underfoot, the only sound in the otherwise quiet night. Looking back, I should have noticed that it was too quiet. We reached the front door, bunched awkwardly on the doorstep. Alvin was closest, but instead of reaching for the handle, he just zoomed in and out with the camera. I sighed. Even Harris twitched with irritation. Maybe it's locked. The fear returned full force. Wordlessly, I grabbed the handle. It turned easily. Harris visibly deflated. The door swung open with an ear-splitting creak, revealing a wall of darkness. Alvin went first, camera ready, mouth hanging open, then me, pulling Harris along. We stepped over the dark threshold, straight into the maw of the beast. The moment I entered, the first thing that hit me was the smell. Grease. The stuffy air was thick with it. It was like the walls had absorbed the grease from 1,000 meals. The front door led them into the kitchen, the core of the greasy stench. The kitchen was a mess. The counters were piled high with dirty dishes, layered with crusty mold that was once food. Pots and pans congealed with fat, sticking out of stagnant dishwater. The peeling wallpaper revealed dark patches underneath. I peered closer with a grimace. Black mold. Finding a light switch, I flicked it, filling the air with the incessant buzz of fluorescent bulbs. It was like stepping into a 24-hour diner. Our footsteps stuck and unstuck to the floor like Velcro. The windows were decorated with handprints, like after caraways ate their fried food. They pressed their hands and faces to peer out the window. Alvin audibly cringed, sticking his camera into the grime. Harris stood in the middle of the tacky floor, hesitant to go further, but unwilling to run away. They really liked fried food, Alvin noted, dipping a finger in the congealed fat. It left an indent up to his knuckle. EW, don't touch it. Harris exclaimed. Alvin laughed. Hey, Homer. He spun round, brandishing his goop finger at Harris. Same shade. Harris puffed up with anger, stepping forward to shove him. I ignored them, nauseous from the stench. We left the kitchen, closing the door to hopefully cut off the smell. It didn't work. The cold hallway was dark. I thought it was from the lack of light, but no. The walls were plastered with black mold. Pulling my shirt over my nose, I gestured for the others to do the same. My father told me about black mold. If you breathed in even one spore, it would settle in your lungs and fester, killing the pink tissue and shrinking the lungs until you hacked up black muck. Harris had his shirt pulled up to his nose, leaving only his watery eyes darting around. I couldn't help thinking that his red shirt made him look more like Bart Simpson. Alvin had the camera close enough to the wall to scratch off dark flakes. I slapped him on the back. Stop it, asshole. As they walked further down the contaminated hallway, careful not to breathe, another sound joined the buzzing cacophony. It was like the crackle of an old TV. They passed a living room. Sat against the wall was an ancient cuboid TV, complete with crooked rabbit ears. It was on, but no one watched. The screen danced with fuzzy static, background music to our antics. Alvin ran around, chirping and zooming in on everything. Look at the state of this couch. Plopped in the middle of the room was a red satin couch, dark and shiny from years of use. As I got closer, there was a definite person-shaped imprint. Mr. Carraway's fat body was forever embedded in the cushions, flattened by years of sweat and grease. Ew. Harris shouted, peering over Alvin's shoulder. I dare you to touch it, Homer. Alvin smirked. No way, are you crazy? I'll catch Ebola or something. Ah, come on. Don't be a loser. How's not touching something gross make me a loser? I don't know. Ask your mother. Harris flushed. It only made his cheeks more golden. I sighed, walking away from the stupid argument. I walked around the room, looking at the pictures hanging on the walls. The Carraways throughout the years. The first was of a young couple, in old-timey wedding attire. The woman scowled out at him, the husband with his eyes closed, light reflecting off his shiny, bald head. Wait, bald? Mr. Carraway wasn't bald. He had disgusting, matted hair. Hair didn't just grow back, did it? In the second picture, Mrs. Carraway still scowled with a few lines around her, with her blonde husband hanging off her arm. No, that wasn't right either. Mr. Carraway had black hair. I didn't bother looking at the rest. Even at a glance, I saw there was a different man in each one. Jeez, Mrs. Carraway sure got around, huh? I turned to my friends, only to find them still bickering. Alvin pressuring Harris to touch the couch, shouting dough as he did. Harris just seethed, trembling with barely disguised anger. If I touch the stupid couch, then you have to stop calling me Homer Simpson, Harris told him. Alvin smirked. Yeah, sure, just do it. Harris took a hesitant step forward, like approaching a wild animal. His yellow fingers danced across the crusty couch. The plastic screech and material set my teeth on edge. Harris barely held back a whine. It's like touching a bald man's head. The mention of bald reminded me of what I found. Before I could reveal it, Alvin made another stupid joke. Bald like Homer? He laughed as Harris shot him a glare. Alvin walked away, still chuckling. I stuck out my foot, and Alvin went flying, him and the camera clattered to the floor. I shot Harris a thumbs up. Alvin grunted, face planting against the wall. He steadied himself with a hand, then jumped back like he was electrocuted. He yelped, "What the hell?" He touched the wall again, his bruised face twisting with confusion. This wall is freaky. Yeah, very funny, I muttered, gesturing for Harris to follow me. No, seriously, Alvin scrabbled for his camera. Touch it. He reached for my hand. I slapped him away. Alvin, you're starting to piss me off. Starting to panic, Alvin grabbed Harris's hand and pressed it against the wall. God damn it! Alvin, I dash, Harris frowned, feeling up the wall. His eyes widened. Ugh, he turned to me. The wall is soft. Soft. The living room walls were plastered with old newspapers. The few bare spots were a sickly shade of pink, mottled with the same mold as the hallway. Alvin raised his camera, pressing a finger to the wall again. There was some give to the wall. It even squished under his touch. God, how does that even happen? His finger came away shiny. The wall feels like it's about to crumble. I roll my eyes. It's the mold. It must be all over the place, Harris said, rubbing his hand on his jeans. Alvin whipped his camera from the wall to Harris's yellowed finger. We better watch the house doesn't fall around us. He sniffed his hand, frowning. The TV buzzed away. The layer of dust added to the sour, damp smell. Just as I was about to suggest we leave, my ears picked up another sound. Someone's coming. I hissed. Footsteps were crunching up the path. I heard a key entering the lock. We didn't have enough time to run. We were going to have to hide. Scatter. Alvin ran first, still clutching his stupid camera. Harris didn't move, rigid with fear. I had to drag him along by his sleeve. I heard Alvin thundering up the stairs. That idiot was going to get caught. I couldn't even call out to him. Harris found a closet opposite the stairs. We dove inside just as the door swung open. The person lumbered in, their gait uneven. When we got our breathing under control, I cautiously opened the closet door, just enough to peer out. The closet was humid. Already sweat dripped down my back. Even more when she came into view. Mrs. Carraway. She was back. Alvin said she was gone, Harris hissed, sounding close to tears. I nudged him to keep quiet. I had never been this close to her. The stink of cigarettes and bacon overpowered the sour dampness. She was old, decrepit. Whatever Botox, she had long faded as her face swam with wrinkles. Her cheeks dangled like the jowls of a dog. Her artificial red hair curled into a perm, dye staining her pale forehead, clashing with the lipstick staining her lips. She wore a neon purple windbreaker suit that swished with every movement. Harris gripped my arm, wetting my sleeve with his clammy hand. Mrs. Carroway ascended the stairs at a snail's pace, taking each step like it was a Herculean effort. Her red-clawed hand gripped the banister. The wood creaked. Halfway up, she paused for breath, just as a thud came from upstairs. Mrs. Carroway tilted her head. I motioned for Harris to hold his breath. Mrs. Carroway stood still, hunched over like a hunchback. As I watched her, something flashed in her milky eyes, something that scared me, that, paired with the long pink tongue darting out to wet her lips, smearing the lipstick even more, made me think of a hungry animal. I felt Harris's hand slip from mine. He must have been terrified. Mrs. Carroway straightened up, her back cracking like a gunshot. Then, with speed that belied her age, the old woman rushed up the stairs. Stranger still, she ran up on all fours, her hands slapping the wood. I stared, mouth open, long after she crawled out of sight. After a moment of silence, I poked my head out of the damn closet. "We need to get out of here," I hissed. Harris nodded, a quick spasm of fear. We hurried quickly and quietly back to the kitchen. The door had been locked. Damn it! Another heavy thud from upstairs made them jump. "Shit, Alvin's still upstairs." Harris shivered, his golden skin iridescent with fierce sweat. Harris wouldn't last much longer without breaking down. We had to be careful if we had to get out. "Harris, I know you're scared, but I need you to go and find another exit." Harris looked at me with wide eyes, looking like I just condemned him to death. I was quick to reassure him. "You just need to be quiet and go back to the living room. I have to find Alvin. Then I'll find you and we'll get out of here together." "Okay." Harris, though he trembled with fear, nodded. I patted his shoulder, ignoring the dampness of his shirt. With that, he hurried off, disappearing into the gloom. Then it was just me, as the de facto leader. It was my responsibility to get everyone out of here. I would not fail. As I stopped at the first step, I would be lying if I said I didn't hesitate. The old woman could be waiting just round the corner, ready to grab me. But I had to save my stupid friend. I was going to lord it over him. The bare wooden steps were hollow, but didn't creak, thankfully. As the landing came into view, the dim, flickering lights made it look like it was illuminated by candles. The stink of grease was at its strongest up here. The mold had spread to the upper floor. There were too many rooms, too many for Alvin to hide, and the old woman. I listened but couldn't hear her awkward steps. A trail of yellow led its way into the bedroom. Did the couple just carry buckets of grease into the bed? Something stopped me in my tracks. My feet rooted to the floor. There, in the middle of the stained floor, was a battered camera. Alvin's camera. I had to warn Harris. Against my better judgment, I snuck back down the stairs, hissing his name. I checked the kitchen first. The yellow walls bright enough to burn my eyes. Wait, yellow. The kitchen walls shone as if covered in fresh grease. Mrs. Carroway went straight upstairs. The walls, originally covered in newspaper, squished under my touch. The mold was gone, replaced with new leathery texture. The soft, yellow texture felt clammy, like sweaty skin. I had to feel my way out of the kitchen, feeling nauseous for some reason. I ducked my head into each stinking room, but he was nowhere to be found. Maybe Harris had already escaped? I couldn't blame him. I crossed my fingers and headed back up the stairs. Alvin's camera lay on the floor, untouched. A shuffling from the bedroom made me jump. Fabric shifted, someone getting into bed. If I was quiet and got to the others before they did anything, we could escape. Where could they be? Alvin dropped in a hurry. It was still running. I rewound the camera. Its high-pitched whine made me look over my shoulder. The footage was just jumbled scenes at first, telling me that Alvin was running and forgot to turn off the camera. I watched it shake left and right, punctuated by Alvin's heavy breathing. I watched him try to find a hiding place, but each room he ducked into was weirder than the last. The yellow and mold were normal compared to these. The first room was dark. As the camera's light glinted against the walls, they glistened. The walls were wet, covered in thick, dark sludge. It dripped from the ceiling in thick strands. It was like the room had been submerged underwater. The second room was another bedroom. Plastic wrap covered the furniture, even the bed. Piled high on the surfaces were rolls of stained bandages, dripping something pink onto the floor. I felt like I could smell it through the camera. Alvin's exclamation rang out from the camera's tinny speakers. As the camera shifted, a pair of bare feet came into view, bony and wrinkled, just like a scene from a found footage movie. The camera swung round, and Mrs. Carraway's face filled the screen. Her sunken, milky eyes glared, staring at me through the camera. With a sound like a plunger unsticking from a blocked toilet, Alvin was gone. The camera fell to the floor with a thud. The sound from earlier, from the new crooked angle. I saw Mrs. Carraway grab Alvin by the scruff of the neck, lifting him against the wall. Alvin's face twisted in fear, his mouth open in a silent scream, impossibly wide, until I thought the skin of his lips would split. I waited for Alvin to push the old woman away. It should have been so easy, but Alvin didn't move. His eyes darted frantically, twin orbs spasming in his skull. What was going on? Movement caught my eye. I peered in closer. Something about Alvin's bare arms disturbed me. The skin seemed to be getting redder. He twisted his head, straining his neck until the tendons bulged. His body refused to follow. With a sound like Velcro unsticking, Alvin lifted his arm. His skin remained behind. Like a flesh-colored sleeve, degloved, gooey like melted bubble gum. His exposed muscles twitched and pulsed, red, wet and shiny. The skin of his arms fused to the wall, slowly sinking into the plaster, like sweaty skin stuck to a leather couch. His shed skin was gone, absorbed into the wall, and it was taking the rest of him. The wall was absorbing him. It was soft, malleable. He sank through like it was made from wet tissue. The skin was sucked from his body, stretching out to paint the wall. Pinks and reds mixed with the rotted wallpaper. The vivid colors burned my eyes. Alvin didn't scream. He didn't make a sound as he was painfully consumed, swallowed up by the house. I saw all of this through the camera. I saw Mrs. Carraway run a bony hand along the quivering pink wall, licking her lips as she did. She bent down, picked up his scattered clothes, and disappeared into her bedroom. The camera shook, almost falling from my trembling hands. What the hell did I just watch? As I struggled to comprehend what just happened, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I was being watched. Looking up, the camera slipped from my hands. There, staring out at me from the black void of the room, was Mrs. Carraway. Her head floated in the darkness like a grim specter. Her mouth spread open in a wet, toothless smile. Spit dribbled as she smacked her lips. Something radiated from the woman like a stench. Something that my body sensed before I realized what it was. Hunger. She reached out, quick as a flash, bony fingers latching onto my neck. Her touch was boiling hot, searing my skin. She pulled me in close, faced a slimy face, spitting as her pink tongue curled out and ran along my face. She was tasting me. Her tongue writhed like a dying fish. Her breath was acrid, hot, my vision filled with her gnashing gums. Somehow, my panic kicking made contact with her withered body. Her grip loosened. I pushed the witch away. She collided against the wall, knocking over a table in the process. I didn't waste a chance. I ran down the stairs, taking 3 at a time. I didn't bother with the door. I just kicked out a window. The glass sliced at my skin. Warm blood trickled down my arms. I didn't care. I only cared about getting out. Finally out, I collapsed onto the soft grass, the cool night air sobering yet overwhelming my heightened senses. My body broke into violent tremors as a scream built up in my throat. It tore its way out, wrenching my throat as it did. Feeling lighter, I got up on trembling legs and ran, my gait as awkward as a newborn deer. I glanced back only once. There at the shattered window was a figure of Mrs. Carraway, staring after me, wide-eyed, still smacking her red lips. I didn't dare look back again. No one believed my story at first. They couldn't disprove it when Harris and Alvin were declared missing. When the police finally went inside to investigate, they came running back out, spewing their guts. My parents refused to tell me anything. All they said was that Harris and Alvin could rest in peace. That didn't comfort me. The Carraway house was soon spoken with the same reverence as Ed Gaines' house. Human flesh was found in the walls, bones in the bed and furniture. Apparently, they found Mr. Carraway in one of the bedrooms, or what was left of him. I heard a rumor that his body was so deteriorated that they had taken the whole bed as evidence. They couldn't separate him. The greasy smell made so much more sense. Mrs. Carraway was taken away by the police, still smiling that dripping smile, even as she was pushed into the cop car. The adult said I hallucinated the entire thing, the house eating my friends. It took years of therapy. I came to accept that fact, but if it was a hallucination, then what the hell was on that camera? The camera was never found.